Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's live stream and Q&A. Hopefully, you're all having a great Tuesday so far and a great start to your week. This is the week before Christmas, and so a lot of things wrapping up. Everything's starting to come to a close. And with that, we are continuing our end of the year wrap up and beginning of the year preview series that we have been working on the last few weeks. The last 2 weeks, we have done our TV show rankings and discussion of the 2025 TV shows. Last week, we did our book rankings and discussion of all the 2025 Star Wars books. This week, we're doing our 2026 preview. So we plan to get in as much as we can. Whatever we don't get in with the preview, we'll talk about next week. But we're going to talk about all the stuff that's coming out in 2026 because, unlike 2025, 2026 looks like a very big year for Star Wars, assuming at least that some of this stuff is actually good. So that's the big caveat, obviously. I mean, I think interest with Star Wars has proven to wane when the product isn't there. But overall, there are a lot of swings this year coming, a lot of things that can really try to deliver us something new, something good, something that takes us in a new direction. And we're excited to talk about all of it. Before we do so, make sure you hit that like button. It really does help us out with tonight's stream. If you're watching on replay, I believe, I don't know if you can do this while you're live, but there's a hype button if you're watching on mobile. You can scroll down near the comments, hit the hype button. That really does boost the video quite a bit. Also, make sure you're commenting. This is a live Q&A. So if you haven't had a chance to ask us a question and you've wanted to, send it into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. You can ask anything you want. It doesn't have to be about 2026 Star Wars. It doesn't really have to be about any of the topics. This is a Q&A with the live format. So make sure you send in your questions there. As always, it is first come, first serve, 2 questions per person. Then we move on to the next person, and we'll cycle back to you if you have more than 2 questions at the end. Super Chat does guarantee you on tonight's show. You can also join Patreon and YouTube memberships where you get priority chat access. So make sure you check those out as well. And that will do it for the preamble stuff. If you're watching on replay, make sure you comment along as well and join us every single week. We will be live next week. I believe it is the 23rd is the last weekend. Well, it'll be the second to last one of the year, Tuesday of the year. So we will be doing our streams for those and getting you guys ready for 2026 because we're pretty excited for next year as well. I mean, we were just talking about it off camera. 2025, while having a lot of highs, it's crazy how front loaded the year was, and we really haven't had much to talk about in the world of Star Wars recently. So it's going to be nice to get back to it, get back to consistent releases, get back to the excitement around this franchise. And hopefully that starts with a strong 2026. All right, let's get into our first thing. And starting off this stream, we'll be doing it the same format we've done the last few weeks. So we're going to talk a little bit about our topics. Then we're going to take your guys' questions, go back to the topics, then take your questions. I keep switching off like that. So we're going to start with the upcoming films and TV shows. Well, this year, for the first time since 2019, we have a film to talk about coming to movie theaters for Star Wars, and it is The Mandalorian and Grogu. As you all know, this movie is coming out in May. It is coming out Memorial Day weekend, May 22nd, and we are going to be definitely talking about it this year. Sonic, what are your thoughts now on The Mandalorian and Grogu? Obviously, we've had our one trailer, we've had all the leaked information. Just in general, maybe, what are your thoughts on the film, but also this is getting us back to theaters for Star Wars? How hyped are you for just a return to Star Wars in theaters?
I think as well as animation has been for Star Wars, as well as some of these high profile shows like Andor have been for Star Wars, at the end of the day, Star Wars is a cinematic franchise that began in movie theaters on the silver screen. And I'm just excited that we're returning to it. Like that was not something that felt guaranteed here in the last couple of years. And yeah, maybe this is not the ideal film to return to theaters with. It's not like the huge exciting thing, especially in 2026 versus maybe like a 2022 or 23 when Mandalorian was still like perfect in so many people's eyes. So yeah, I mean it's a little weird, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm very excited for it. That trailer that they released online, I mean, it came amongst the whole Jimmy Kimmel thing that was happening, just a weirdly timed thing. It almost felt like it was just thrown out there. But actually, if you've been going to movie theaters recently, like I went to see Zootopia 2 the other day, they're doing a modified trailer that has a lot more of the action cinematics, a lot more of the stuff that's happening in the arena, a lot more of the action with the AT&T, and it just looks like a lot more of a dynamic film just by inserting a couple more shots. I know there's some like discussions about this movie being really like promoted as like a cutesy like Pixar Moana style, like go for the cute little thing that kids love because kids are right now dominating a lot of Disney's releases once again. It's a valid strategy, don't get me wrong, but this is still Star Wars. This is still a legacy franchise of multiple generations. You're gonna have to catch up people on the things that they want to enjoy. And with this being like a soft reboot of The Mandalorian Grogu, right? This is essentially going back to the season one vibes, taking as many story elements that make sense from the first three seasons and continuing it forward with a new facelift, essentially, right? This is going to be a very interesting decision for the future of the characters of the Mandalorian, of the character of Grogu. And I'm hoping some little rumors and leaks that we've been hearing are actually punching up this film more than what we've seen so far. Obviously, nothing that seems to be like very heavily true quite yet, like just little glimmers of things that seem pretty exciting. Definitely would raise the floor of this movie. But yeah, I'm excited for it. I know a lot of industry projections are actually quite high for it. They're saying like because of how it's being marketed to kids, it'll actually get them on board even before like a lot of people who watched The Mandalorian and the whole Mandoverse. But hey, man, Star Wars in movie theaters, it's something that I've been craving for a while now. Like after Episode 5, leading up to yeah, I know there was the Clone Wars movie, but leading up to Episode 7, uh, Episode 3 in 2005 and Episode 7 2015, that's a 10-year gap for most people when it comes to Star Wars, and Episode 3 was, like, the end for so many people before it got restarted under Disney. This is our first, like, restart under Disney, like, this is like, "Hey, we finished that first phase," like, almost like this was Disney's Bantam era of Star Wars. Now are we gonna really get into a more unified, clear sound version of Star Wars on the big screen? Hopefully, and I hope that this is like a good way to get us into like these mid-level budget Star Wars films that can like have their own little sagas without having to be so directly connected to the bigger Star Wars story. And then that allows Starfighter and other movies to then open up big avenues that other stories can really peruse, can really dive into. But yeah, I mean, Mandalorian Grogu is a weird film, but nonetheless, I am still excited to have the continuing adventures of Din Djarin and Din Grogu with the filmmaker like Favreau, who we've seen elevate so many huge blockbuster films. Hopefully, do it one more time here with this character, and hopefully get a couple more films out of it.
Yeah, I feel very similarly to you. I mean, there's no real new information to go off of. I think a lot of that honestly is a little disappointing and surprising. It's not shocking because of what Disney's promoting currently with Avatar and then obviously the huge multiple trailer drop for Doomsday's early promotion, but I really thought by this point, by, 2 weeks left in the year, we would be at a place where we had a little bit more Mandalorian promotion, where we had release dates for Maul Shadow Lord and Ahsoka and all that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it is a little surprising that Star Wars, for seemingly such a big year in 2026, the full relaunch to theaters, the full really reboot of Star Wars on TV with the final, project from that early phase, Ahsoka season 2 coming out with new animated shows, with the future of Star Wars possibly being in animation with something like the Ninth Jedi. With all these things coming, we really are not focusing on Star Wars at all at this point. So that either means Star Wars is backloading the year or they don't look at 2026 in the same way that we all kind of have for Star Wars, that 2027 is their year because they're really hyping up 2027 with the theatrical re-releases of the original trilogy coming out soon. So it's weird, but I'm still excited for Mandalorian Grogu. I don't think this is gonna be just a throwaway thing. I mean, it can't be for them. They really do need a win in the world of Star Wars, and I think this is something that can do that. It can at least be a good time. Unfortunately, we're at a place in the Star Wars fandom currently to where even if it's just okay, I don't know if it'll really get its flowers because people are at this point wanting to not like things or just wanting something to be Andor level. And it something that's in between is going to have a hard time really making a name for itself. So, like you mentioned, the children's audience, but also kind of the social media meme audience, that type of thing. It really needs something in that realm to, I think, get its legs a lot further than what the mainstream audience is going to do to take this. Obviously, still 5.5 months left, pretty much 6 months from now before this movie comes out. So we still have plenty of time to promote. It's just the fact that this project needs it, I think, far more than something like Avengers Doomsday, but Avatar is being used to promote that rather than to promote Mandalorian. And it's fair. They have a lot more money invested in Doomsday. They have a lot more, MCU is the biggest IP of all time now in film. You don't want to just let it go out with a whimper. So they have a lot tied into that. But The Mandalorian and Grogu is something that's really important for us as Star Wars fans, getting our first theatrical Star Wars experience in 7 years. And it does feel like it's just going by the wayside. It's just going to be another release. And hopefully they change that. But I'm still looking forward to it. I still have hope because of the talent around it. I think us underestimating it does leave it open to having a lot more success, the same way season one of The Mandalorian did, where, in hindsight, if we go back and look, season one of The Mandalorian isn't a masterpiece, but it's a good show and it's a good time and it flew under the radar. And when people saw it, it was lightning in a bottle. And hopefully, this film can kind of capture that same spirit, that same fun, that same imagination, because I think that's where we need to hit is even if it's not going to be a game changing film, even if it's not going to really capture the cultural zeitgeist, maybe the way The Mandalorian season one did originally when it came out, it can at least build those Star Wars moments, build that Star Wars spirit to the point where we feel that Star Wars is in a place that feels more like how it should be rather than how it's been over the last few years. So there's a lot riding on The Mandalorian and Grogu, but I think it can deliver at least a solid time. I'm not expecting, it to be one of the top 5 Star Wars movies ever, but I think it can be better than some of the things we've gotten recently. And that's honestly going to be a win for Star Wars with how mixed reception has been over most of what we have seen from the franchise. But let us know what you guys think in the chat. Are you excited for Mandalorian Grogu? I know seemingly most people, it just really hasn't hit that this movie's even coming out. But we are about 6 months away from this movie coming out. If you're excited, let us know in the chat. If you're not, let us know why in the chat. We want to hear from you guys. We're going to go to a question Badasai has asked, and Badasai asked this last week when we were talking about Old Republic, and we didn't get a chance to talk about it because that was an Old Republic dedicated stream. But I want to make sure we get to this today because it is a big story. It is definitely something that's going to be pretty important for the way the industry looks at AI moving forward here. And that's the story that Disney has made a deal with OpenAI. For those of you who don't know, they're the people who made ChatGPT to basically allow ChatGPT to use the images of their characters to create, your own AI videos, your own AI images, your own AI art or sketches, whatever you want to call it. Disney's licensing it so that AI can make, a picture of Darth Vader dancing. That's basically what this deal is. And Disney obviously gets a lot of promotion out of that, being one of the first companies, film studios, one of the first IP holders, major IP holders, to allow their characters to legally be used in AI products definitely gives them an upper hand in terms of like free viral social media marketing. So that would be obviously to me the main reason they would do this. They have said that it does not include the voices or likenesses of actors. We'll see how that ends up working out, because, people will find a way around all this stuff. But basically, the direct quote is under the license, fans will be able to watch curated selections of Sora generated videos on Disney Plus, and OpenAI and Disney will collaborate to utilize OpenAI's models to power new experiences for Disney Plus subscribers, further innovating creative ways to connect with Disney stories and characters. Sora and ChatGPT images are expected to start generating fan inspired videos with Disney's multi brand licenses in early 2026. According to Bob Iger, the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence marks an important moment for our industry, and through this collaboration with OpenAI, we will thoughtfully and responsibly extend the reach of our storytelling through generative AI while respecting and protecting the creators and their work. Bringing together Disney's iconic stories and characters with OpenAI's groundbreaking technology puts imagination and creativity directly into the hands of Disney's fans in ways we've never seen before, giving them richer and more personal ways to connect with the Disney characters and stories they love. So that's, like I said, just a bunch of ways of saying, hey, you can now make your own video with, Ariel and Darth Vader teaming up to fight Palpatine. Like, if that's what you want to do, go for it. Um, Overall, my thoughts, I'm not a fan of AI just in general, outside of using it as a tool to help you with, daily grind. I think at that point, we are at the point where like it's here to stay in the most minute ways. I mean, I don't like the idea of people not using their brains anymore to do simple things, but at some point, simple tasks are going to be eliminated by just typing it into Chat GPT. We'll see how that does with the younger generations nowadays, but it can be a very useful tool. I'm not a fan of it in artistic ways. I don't think it really has much artistic merit. I understand some of the ideas around using it to be able to tell your own personal stories. Great. If you want to make your own AI video for yourself, go right ahead. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But anytime the AI is used as a means to cut out kind of the middleman, to cut out the creators in between, concept and finale, that's when I have big problems with AI. So I'm not a fan of just major companies promoting it as some new form of art. And so this deal remains to be seen for me how much it will actually, do that as something that just is like, hey, you want to make a funny video with Jar Jar Binks? Go ahead. You can do that now as a Disney Plus subscriber. I don't necessarily have much of a problem with that. It's just whatever, like as long as we have the ability to tell what's real and what's not, that's just up to the user. But anytime it turns into possibly being sold as art, sold by these companies as like some type of thing you can actually, watch. If Disney tries to make an actual series on Disney Plus with this and it goes beyond just a gimmick, that's when I'm going to have more problems with it as purely an artistic effort. But Senek, what are your thoughts on this overall?
To put it simply, I hate it. I'm just not a fan at all of how AI has so overwhelmingly taken over every industry. Like, there's workplaces that require you to have their proprietary AI software running, even if it makes it worse for your actual tasks, just because it's like now you're a live use case for all these companies as they make so many data centers, as they continue to upgrade their models and all that. Sora, I think, has some moments of fun. I'm not gonna say I haven't seen some things that have made me laugh. Like, yeah, I definitely have. I've seen like, videos of like dogs being stopped by like police officers with like body cam and they're like, "Sir, do you know how many peanut butter cans you're eating?" And then like speeding off. Like, yeah, stuff like that makes me laugh. I'm not gonna be like, "Oh, these things can't be funny." But this idea of using Sora, and that's definitely been pushed by a lot of people, of using Sora as a way to create new art in cinema in a way that never been done before, just by prompts and all that. No, I genuinely hate it. I mean, I think we've already seen backlash to stuff like this. We've seen how negatively people are looking at the Coca-Cola ad, for example, and they just unlisted it from their channel because they kept on saying, "Oh, we spent months working on prompts." Like, okay, great. You spent months refining your sentence. Like, wow, you're no different than a high schooler writing an essay, right? Like, it's kind of that's kind of what they're saying, right? And I'm like, are you drawing anything digitally, anything with your hand? Are you actually working with people, bring different assets? And no, it's just, let's just take what we have up in the cloud, up on the internet, type it all out, and then generate stuff. Like, okay, sure. So I'm not a fan of that. I know Larian, for example, that's the studio behind Baldur's Gate 3. Huge success, so well appreciated by the gaming fandom and everything. They even won another award this year for the Video Game Awards. And now they're already getting a huge amount of backlash because they've been saying like, "Oh, we're gonna use generative AI to help us in the concepts, like the idea process stage of like the project that we're working on, the Divinity game." That's arguably even worse, I'd say. It's like you're saying, "Oh, I'm gonna ignore human creativity," or say like, "Oh, I'm gonna have something be at the table here instead of like someone else, like a young kid growing up who has so many ideas, who's been inspired by the products that you've made and the games that you've like helped literally dominate the last few years of the video game landscape." That stuff like that is really bad. And again, I'm like Liam. I think AI is best used as an additive, right? It should never be a replacement. But unfortunately, seems like people want to do that. So, especially using Sora with the huge amount of resources that are going to be constrained out of that, like we live in a first world country, we're not going to really notice it that much. Someone who's living in, squalor probably has like the real effects already of how we're affecting climate change and everything by continuously pumping stuff out like this. And yes, I'm a proponent of more green energy, like nuclear energy in this country. But it's kind of sad to say that a lot of the nuclear projects that we seemingly are getting pushed ahead are only because some person is working on a big AI project and is like, "Yeah, I want my data center to be directly connected to that." Right? It's sad. Like we've heard so many instances in this country of like how oil fracking has hurt communities. Flint, Michigan, the water supply still is bad. Now we're already hearing people with near data centers who are like, "Yeah, my costs have gone up for not doing anything, nothing different, if not decreasing what I'm doing, and the cost is put on us." Right? Stuff like that really bums me out. And then with this deal, this is Disney saying like, "Yeah, okay, go ahead, do whatever you want." And I'm like, "Oh man, that's horrible." And they've already kind of opened the gates before this by saying like they're going to start having some user content that's going to be shown on Disney Plus, like a select few. I don't mind that if it's truly by somebody who's like making something really cool, some cool art or something that's like, "Oh, awesome." Like that's something that the fandom wants to see and like they want to show their appreciation for. Great. Who am I to judge somebody who's been inspired by a century of Disney and all its artistry and all that? But with the timing of all this, it just feels like we're gonna start having like a whole section of like AI videos of like you said, Jar Jar Binks for riding a horse around with Mickey Mouse and stuff like that. It's gonna be like, okay, whatever, fine. And it's not like we haven't already seen stuff like this. We've seen on YouTube so many people already being like Luke meets Darth Bane and all these different like channels that are just purely dedicated to creating sort of these very minimal movement videos, and people are like, "Wow, this is more real Star Wars." I'm like, it's a cool concept if you want to visualize these discussions, but you're not actually thinking about the discussions anymore. You put in a prompt, you're saying, "Here's some lines that they would say, pull it from this movie, pull it from this book, make something out of it." That's not making anything new. You're just reflecting what's already been created by humans who spent time, who spent like years of their lives dedicated to creating these characters, to developing their legacy, their impact on Star Wars and all that. So it's frustrating to me. Like I really don't like that Disney is taking such a big stance and being so supportive of this. Well, would I say have anything? to, like, at this point on them, no, but I think we'll start to see people have a little bit more backlash to it once it's actually out there. And like you were saying, like, once people find workarounds for stuff, they're like, oh, likeness, profane content, all that stuff is going to come out of it, just like we've seen workarounds already for just using Sora. So yeah, I mean, the ethics, the rules, the laws around AI right now are catching up to the technology. And every time they seem like they're making a little bit of step forward, the technology is moving up 2, 3 steps ahead. So it's weird. I don't love it. It's kind of ironic saying that as a fan of Star Wars when we have, you know, droids like R2D2 and C3PO that are essentially artificial intelligence supercomputers combined. But even in the stories, they're additive. We've never seen them as like taking over the role of a Jedi. I've seen them take over role of a senator and all that. They serve a function, like you said, to eliminate some of this basic stuff that would be just grunt work in life, so that you focus on the really important stuff and work as resource centers. Right? They don't necessarily take over anything. So seeing this with this franchise in Star Wars with Disney as the overruling manager, and it's so disappointing to me, but I think we're gonna see backlash to it the moment it gets actually implemented.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said as well. And I think one thing too with Batasai at the bottom commenting saying more so Batasai says, "For me, the only use I care about is to be able to use it as a tool to deepfake only specific characters. I'm not interested in AI generated full stories." And I personally, am still very anti deepfake outside of cameos. I think it's a very cool gimmick, but I do not trust it as a technology that can bring to life a character with other humans around it. So that's where you and I think, have always differed a little bit about a sign. If I believe I remember right, you were somebody who's very pro, like, hey, let's make him look exactly like the version we've always seen, and that's fair. That's your opinion. I don't agree with that. I just would rather have a real person bringing that emotion to the stories. But there is always going to be issues with this no matter what, and it is kinda just the world we live in. I mean, some of this started, you know, 20 years ago with stuff like Photoshop, right? The ability to change the way something looks, and manipulate photos, never knowing what's real or what's not. And to me, that's a big key, right? If something with these types of videos looks inherently fake, I don't have as much problem with it because there's still such a downgrade from that versus true art. But when it comes to trying to make it in the same way and pretending like you have some type of artistic merit by just typing in a sentence when you didn't even write a script. Like, I think, you if you decided to write your own Star Wars fan film, you didn't have the money to raise to even make a fan film level budget Star Wars movie, and you wanted to type an entire script and use Sora to animate it. Cool. That's great for you. You're not monetizing it. You're not making any money. It's a fan film effort. I think that's okay. But if you're pretending like you made some great fan film by just typing in, Count Dooku fights uh, Darth Vader in Force Vision, and then it comes up with its own thing, you know, by itself, that's not, to me, that has zero artistic merit. That's something that's not in any way cool. I think that's just boring and lame. So there are a lot of things about this that are very fine lines, right? It can be a really funny thing. It can be a really fun way to bring your experiences, your ideas to life. But where the line has to be drawn, and where I completely agree with Sonic, is just being able to differentiate between what is actually art and what's not. And that's where I really do honestly hate AI images. I think it can be a fun way to bring goofy videos that are impossible to create, unless you're somebody with, a ton of time and impressive animation skills to make. It could be fun to make a goofy video, but trying to pretend like some type of image you created on OpenAI is art versus people who can actually paint and actually draw and actually do these things, that is where you lose me as well. I think it's just goofy, and if one day we lost a lot of this too, like that's the thing with this conversation is it'll always keep changing for me as somebody who follows the idea of like collectors markets and all that type of stuff. We see the ebbs and flows in these. People think they've caught a trend and then they're actually nobody cares about it in a couple of years. The same thing kind of happened with NFTs. Like those were huge in 2020. Nobody talks about them anymore, right? And that was always because there was no tangibility to them. Like if you're a collector, you want to have something. You don't want it to be this amorphous thing that exists in the cloud. Like who cares about that? So that never made any sense. And I think in some ways, once everybody can do this, once everybody can find a way to make a video with Darth Vader and Jar Jar Binks, then almost it loses a little bit of its gimmickness because you can do anything. And so that's where all this can sound crazy cool at the beginning, and it's going to be something people mess around with for 20 minutes and then give up on. So it'll be interesting to see its lifespan too, because AI's changed so much every year for the last 3, 4, 5 years. This is a 3-year deal. What's it look like at the end of the 3-year deal? Is OpenAI even the company that like everybody's dealing with, right? Like what does the AI landscape look like in 3 years? I don't think anybody knows. It's going to keep changing. Month by month it changes. I can't imagine what it's going to look like when we're ending 2028. So, I think this is an evolving story. Um, it is disappointing to see like I completely understand it from Disney's perspective. You're trying to get on the ground floor. You're trying to curb this so that hey, at least we can make some money off of people making AI videos with our characters because it's going to happen no matter what. So I get it from a business perspective, but it is definitely giving credence to it when you are funding it as a company. So I don't know. It's a very slippery slope, but it's one of those conversations that's just gonna keep rolling for the next few years, and like Seneca said, we're just it's new information is gonna come out about it every single day. We'll see how it changes and what people end up using it for, and, everybody will find there will be ways people find to use it poorly. That's a given. So we'll see how that turns out and what Disney does then when, you know, something happens with this whole thing, but who knows? But yeah, your guys' comments, let's go back to some more of them. Uh, Coltrane says, I would like to think that AI will never be able to completely replace human creativity and compelling storytelling, although maybe future generations will be less capable of telling the difference. And maybe future generations, if they become too reliant on AI, won't be able to even think of something creative for themselves. I think that's one of the big ways we handicap ourselves, right? Is our generation can still kind of tell the difference when we're all old and our grandkids are, doing everything with some type of tool, some type of basically thinking assistant for them. Who will be able to even come up with storytelling? Who will be able to tell the difference between human creativity and AI creativity? Because so much of human thought will be you or blended through the lens of what AI is telling people. I think that's ultimately one day going to be our bigger problem, more so than the ability for an AI to write a script as good as a human can.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, storytelling is an ancient practice, right? And us fundamentally going away from having this be a way that connects humans to explain different things about our environments, explain things about our emotions, the people in our history, something that AI can only reflect on. And more research comes out about AI. One of the funniest things about it is that apparently even these high scale models, which again are nowhere truly near a singularity like we see in Star Wars, where they are their own independent, free thinking machines just with regulations around them. We're finding out that so many of these models, which are based off of like medical library lookups for answers, they're struggling between objective facts and really well presented subjective opinions. Who also struggles with that? Humans, right? So it's like, what's really the point, honestly, for using AI to replace every single thing, especially with something that is such a personal gift that we give to the world to give to others in storytelling. So yeah, maybe for storytellers in the future, we'll look at AI and have regulations in place and all that. But there's just too many governments right now that are like even our own federal governments, like we can overrule state laws. I'm like, well, what's the point of that if people are like actively finding and use cases are different in an Alabama versus a California?
I can't hear you anymore, Cynic. I don't know if everybody else can. Can you guys still hear me?
Can
Okay.
you know?
You can, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I think I just bumped into my cable. But as I was saying,
You sound like you have an
it's just
echo now, kind of.
oh weird.
Sorry. I'll let you fix that, and I'll respond to Batasai while you're working on that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not against motion capture, Batasai. Like I agree. It's there's no real difference other than the AI generated voices, the AI generated emotions. I think the big difference between motion capture and what deepfake does is that with motion capture, Andy Serkis is bringing to life things that don't aren't possible. It's a replacement for makeup more so than it is for performance. Um, it's bringing to life an ape that can talk. It's bringing to life a 8 foot tall, 9 foot tall being in Snoke. It's bringing to life King Kong or Smeagol. It's not bringing to life a person that doesn't look like Andy Serkis, but he's playing that person, right? Like it's a very different a big difference there. Personally, for me, I'm not saying it can't work as a substitute, like because I am with you. Like I've loved, especially the appearance of Luke in Book of Boba Fett. Like it's magical seeing somebody who looks very similar to Mark Hamill have that kind of performance. It's very, very cool, and it's a magical one-off experience. I just don't wanna see a movie trilogy or Luke as a main character for an entire 2-hour movie like that because I think it just loses a little bit of its awe. It just becomes more of like a, "Okay, this guy stands out specifically." Even somebody like Tarkin, who has a big role in Rogue One, I didn't mind that as much as I would mind, having Luke for as the main character of a 2-hour movie and just having to constantly look at him and look at everybody around him and go, "No, okay, well, that one's not real," right? Like, I just don't think it works as well. So, but I don't disparage your opinion with it, and it's still a lot of it is still being used by talented people who are working with some type of software. It's not all AI. AI will be used to enhance it, and maybe AI will be used to replace it, but it's still going to be a human process. And there will still be a performance under there. But I think the comparison to video games is similar as well. Sure, and I give you that one. But video games and movies don't have video games. Every single person's animated, right? It's not one person amongst a crowd. I think that's my big problem is if your main character is Luke Skywalker, and we all love Luke Skywalker, but he's standing there amongst 20 real people, it's so easy to pick him out as the thing that just feels off, right? That's how I feel, but we can agree to disagree on that. I think if that works for you, then maybe that is a credit to the future of it. It just doesn't necessarily work for me.
Hopefully you guys can hear me a little bit more clearly now.
Sounds a lot
Okay.
better, yeah.
All right. Yeah, okay, just to finish up on my point, like the way like we've been talking about AI and how it's affecting storytelling and everything, it's just the fact that we now have people working through this technology, trying to catch up with like how to like work around the legality of it, the morals and ethics around it. We're always a step behind right now at this stage. And it's not just America. A lot of countries have governments that are saying like, "Hey, we're gonna like interfere and cut off because we want these companies to maximize whatever they're working on." There is a bit of a bubble there too, just like the dot com bubble of the late '90s, early 2000s, when everything online we thought every web page would be something you can make money off just like that, right? It's I don't think where we're at in AI is going to be truly sustainable. It's going to have to be diminished. I mean, well, we've been seeing this in any big trend. Anytime something pops up in these by these tech companies, right? They always have to scale it back. A great example that has definitely affected our channel is streaming. Streaming seemed like, oh, it was going to be forever and everything was going to have its own character, get its own story. Your D characters, your C-list characters would become stars on TV. And we realized, yeah, you can't really just make movies of all these characters. You have to still play by, some established rules, what people expect, and what feels real to them, what feels like you can keep up with, in an increasingly more fragmented landscape. And now that we're adding AI on top of this and we're trying to add it into our creative world, we're gonna have people like you, me and Liam, who are just gonna, for the most part, just reject it. We're gonna have some people who are gonna be like, this is awesome. I would not be surprised because I've already started seeing some of it. People who have not only just taken a lot of the hard-earned work of like a lot of these legends authors, but now they're just filtering it in and they're like, here's this AI version of the story as it's told. I respect people who take like, like the free camera models of like a Jedi Knight Academy, create their own mods, or work with a group and community, and then kind of play through like the story that's told in these books. Like I've seen Thrawn trilogy be adapted that way. I find that a lot more like, hey, that's still someone putting the work and the effort, working as a community, putting these texture packs together, customizing a game to tell a story. But seeing people who are already like saying, "Oh, this is now real Star Wars because I put it into AI," it's like, well, no, now you're also diminishing the author, who will never see any amount of credit for this. Which Disney's already been undermining a lot of these authors by not paying them any residuals for these books with the Essential Legends collection reprints. It's just a lot of, unfortunately, big business tactics that Disney's doing, and I just don't like what they're doing here with Sora. And like Liam said, we don't even know what the landscape's going to look like in 3 years. Already, I have friends who like work on a lot of AI projects. They're like, yeah, at one point it looked like ChatGPT was just so far ahead. Then it seemed like DeepSeek for a little bit from China, and now all of a sudden people are like, no, it's Google Gemini. Like at the end of the day, the internet was won by Google's multiple decades ago. They have so much research, they have so much searches just archived and indexed that they can just use that to feed into their models, and now they're continuing to make it more and more inclusive in all their products, right? So we don't really know if Sora in like 2 3 years is going to be like the big thing that helps them elevate past a Google, when we already see Google already has its Google Veil, which has arguably had better imaging and stuff. Like I've seen a whole like car show done with everybody is AI, all the cars are AI, and I was actually shocked at how close it looked to being like 100% like real versus some of the stuff I see on Sora that is a little bit more cartoony and goofy. So I don't know. This could just be $1 billion that might be pulled pretty early by Disney, and maybe that's why they're like there might be some opt outs here. Maybe by the second or third year, they're like, nah, this isn't working for us. We don't. This is dependent on reception, all this and that, and that's not working for us. So yeah, those are just my final thoughts. They're talking about the motion capture stuff versus deep faking. I am in agreement with what Liam is saying. Like, Battlestar, I think you are right in the sense that like there isn't too much of a difference, right? When we know that originally for the Luke Skywalker appearance in the second season of The Mandalorian, they did try to use a deepfake model. It looked pretty good, but they're like, we're just not quite there yet. The amount of resources, the time would be, the turnaround with a project like The Mandalorian that does so much post production almost first before they even get to production. It just didn't really make sense for them. But they deepfake for, the Book of Boba Fett and that version of Luke. And it was good. I'm not going to deny it. But like Liam said, it's not just like you're making a digital mask. You are taking old Mark Hamill performances, interviews, and all that, compositing it together and matching it up with the eyesight and eyeline of the actor, who does look pretty good. I'm not gonna be like one of those people who's like he looks exactly like Mark Hamill. He doesn't. I still think whatever you do, if you're gonna bring back these actors, you need to use some sort of prosthetics, digital or analog, very much practical effects. But like Liam said, a game like Claire Obscura has mocap fully done for all these characters, but everything around them is animated too. We have not reached that point yet, and we may never truly want to reach that point, to have like the fidelity of reality be matched with video games. Like that would also necessitate a huge push in virtual reality, which we've been talking about for 10, 15 years, but has not quite really gotten there yet either. So I get the idea of what you're saying of, like, using digital masks. I think digital prosthetics is kind of the future. I wouldn't be surprised if that's how we start getting some, like, live action Luke and the Big 3, like, miniseries and, like, feature presentations and all that, but it would still be primarily actors just replacing, like, their nose or coloring their eye a little bit different or just in certain shots having to deep fake a couple angles because there's just no way to make it look quite close enough, but yeah, all the other examples that you bring up, like, of War of the Planet of the Apes, right, with Caesar, with Gollum and all that, that's a huge contention point too. I know Andy Serkis has been like, we have to really reward a lot of these motion capture artists like myself. Like, I'm not gonna deny what he's done hasn't been groundbreaking, right? What he did with Weta and everything hand in hand. He's definitely somebody who's like almost like a visual producer around it. He is giving his input and helping these artists more closely capture his likeness in that character. But again, the key point there is artists. They're still painstakingly drawing all this stuff in. They're not just like, oh, I can find some Gollum image online and copy pasting it. Maybe they did for future movies, but they still have to animate. They still have to paint pixel by pixel at times. Sometimes a couple of frames is going to be like a 2 week project for people, right? That's how insane a lot of CGI is, and that's why CGI for a lot of films has felt really like not as clean as it did like in Parts of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest and stuff. When there was way more time, there's way more to do. Now we've been pushing these artists to the brink on multiple projects at a time, especially with the MCU, with the rise of very CGI heavy films. And it shows because some of these things, these artists just simply can't handle. And the ones who are willing to stick around with it are having lesser wages, less time for themselves. Their well being is off and they burn out more quickly. So, a deep fake in some ways could help, sure, but I just don't see it being the same level as what an artist is doing for motion capture, painstakingly animating all this using physics engines and stuff like that. They're still working on things that require their direct input at every single minute, other than when they're actually playing through scenes and stuff like that. Versus a deep fake, it's like, okay, as long as I have that person, I can just composite together, line up a couple dots on people's faces, and that works, but it's tough to make it line up that well. At the end of the day, even for that defect that we got of Luke, I'm sure they went in, had to erase some stuff, clean it up here and there. It was only really the deepfake was probably untouched in more of those stationary shots where picture me surprised, but everybody's like, yeah, looks good, but he does look like he's a little bit dead in the eyes. He doesn't really look fully alive. There's some lack of imperfection that makes him human. So I get your point. Definitely do. I think there we're gonna see that line be blurred a bit more, like when I'm saying with digital prosthetics, but like full deep fake, that's gonna be hard because I mean, you could look at Lamar Campbell in 1977 versus 1980 after his car crash. It does not look the same. Am I gonna suddenly be like, "Oh, yeah, I want that?" No. I don't want him to look like he did in '77. I still want him to age. I still want his character to look like this and that. We're seeing already with Rory McCann taking the role of Balin in season 2. Yeah, it's tragedy for sure, but it almost lines up story-wise to have him look a little bit more twisted, darker, deeper into his journey, and people will easily buy into that. A lot of recast even today, people sometimes forget like, "Oh, that's not that same person." So, like, the people are convinced by just a few things being a little off, as opposed to spending so much money on a defect that things have to be perfect. Sometimes chasing that perfection reaches into that uncanny valley, makes us be like, "Whoa, there is something wrong," even if we can't quite put words to it. Versus just, "Hey, it's a recast. All right, whatever. I've sunk back into the character."
Yeah, all really good points. And this is a topic that will be evolving, and we want to continue to broach on it as, issues and maybe positive things arise. So we'll keep discussing it in these lives. So if anything happens out of it soon, we'll let you guys know, and you guys feel free to ask us. But we do have to get back to our main topics as well for the stream because we've gone almost an hour, and this is I mean, it's a important one, so we wanted to take the time for sure to answer it. But as HD Game Tube TV talks about with Maul Shadow Lord, we got to get to the TV section at least for this stream, and then we'll get back to your guys' chat. So keep firing them in. Appreciate the discussion. Thanks for all your guys' thoughts, and we'll get to yours too, Coltrane. Appreciate you the kind words as well, and definitely think that's an interesting video topic, also. All right, let's get to TV though, because TV, even though we are getting the Mandalorian and Grogu, TV has been the bread and butter of Star Wars for the last 6 years or so. And we are still getting TV next year, even though it doesn't necessarily feel like a packed year for TV, but I think it's an experimental year for TV. Unfortunately, we still don't know when any of these TV shows are starting. So it's hard to guess exactly what's coming from Star Wars TV. We also have yet to see any real footage from two of the three shows. We got the Maul Shadow Lord trailer. That was an official trailer, right? Or was that a leak? That was official.
I think
Um,
it's official, yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
thought it was official. It's hard to remember because all the stuff from Celebration has been getting out so easily, but I'm pretty sure there was the official trailer. I think Maul Shadow Lord's coming first. So to start this section off fully, I'll list the three shows. We've got Maul Shadow Lord, which is our first full animated series from Lucasfilm Animation since the Bad Batch ended 2 years ago. We have Ahsoka season 2, which as of now, and I believe unless something shocking happens and they announce something new, will be our only live action Star Wars TV show next year. That should be that I believe they wrapped, so that should be coming out, I would guess personally, around this same time season 1 did. Because Ahsoka, as much as it was divided in terms of reception, it still had a big bump with the Star Wars fandom. It didn't necessarily get the viewership at large that they were hoping for, like a lot of the casual people or people who are just interested in watching a new show on Disney Plus. It didn't quite grab that audience, but it seemed to have a big bump with Star Wars fans, with people invested in Star Wars. So I think pushing it in that end of summer, beginning of fall window seems accurate. And then we have the Visions, the Ninth Jedi anime, excuse me, which is our first full anime series from Star Wars and our first Visions spinoff that we're getting from Star Wars in the TV realm. We've had books and comics, obviously. But The Ninth Jedi proves to be something that will be really unique for Star Wars. Not only will it be a co venture between Lucasfilm, uh, but it will be our first foray into getting a full series outside of American animation from Star Wars. And I really hope that Vision succeeds Ninth Jedi because frankly, I want to see some more Star Wars animation and Lucasfilm animation. As much as they've given us fantastic stuff over the years, and I really love most of what they've done, and I've at least liked almost everything they've done. It's a small team. It's one studio. Lucasfilm is not a huge studio, and it's one studio working on one thing. I would love it if this led to future projects where, similarly to how directors like a Sean Levy, or what we saw with John Favreau when he initially came into the fold, or the Steven Soderbergh Kylo Ren pitch, where directors can come and pitch ideas to Lucasfilm and get a Star Wars film. I would love it if animation studios were able to pitch something and work on Star Wars. Disney obviously owns the two most prestigious ones in the history of film with Walt Disney Animation Studios and Pixar Animation Studios. And Disney has made a film of one of their IPs into an animated movie with Big Hero 6. People don't realize that that was a Marvel comic. I would love if there was some type of crossover one day with like Star Wars actually being made by other people, getting more Star Wars movies in animation, getting more Star Wars TV in animation. And I think Visions is a first step for that because it was something that a lot of us were hoping to see. And in this crowded anime market where anime is just exploding everywhere and Visions has its fandom, it's hard to truly stand out. This type of series gives Star Wars a lot better chance of doing so. Hopefully it's something unique, hopefully it's something different, and hopefully we find out where it is in the canon, because if it is actually part of the main continuity, I think people will take it a lot more seriously. And if it is part of the main continuity, hopefully it brings people in and interest in anime, because even if Disney doesn't want to, license Star Wars out to other studios domestically to make a Star Wars product, or they don't want to give one of their studios the ability to make a Star Wars product, if we got partnerships with Disney and more anime studios or more foreign studios that can make stuff that provides a little less competition, it would be really nice to just have Star Wars in that animation space, because I think animation obviously gives you limitless possibilities. Star Wars is a franchise and a brand with limitless possibilities. It would be so cool to be able to get more animated Star Wars storytelling. So that's a big one for me, that just I hope it's good and I hope it succeeds and I hope it finds an audience, because that one to me really pushes Star Wars into the future, with what the possibilities are for Star Wars to grow as a brand in animation. Ahsoka season 2 is something I'm very much so looking forward to. Still have fond memories and feelings towards the first season. Overall, it ended on a little bit of a flat note, but there were still a lot of fun highs, a lot of good times. Overall, I there were a lot of things in it I really didn't like Sabine becoming a Jedi, but there were other things that were really great, like the appearances with Hayden. The casting was pretty good overall. Balin was a great new character. Some of the stuff with the lore connections and the connections to Dathomir, the Great Mothers, all of that I thought was really cool. So there was a lot of cool, unique Dave Filoni-isms in Ahsoka, and some of the stuff I really appreciate about what Dave Filoni brings to Star Wars. So I'm always looking forward to seeing how he continues with his style of Star Wars storytelling and how he continues to hone his craft as a live action director, showrunner, filmmaker, just in general. So looking forward to that. Although my hype level's not nearly where it was for season one when it was initially coming out. And then Maul Shadow Lord, I'm also pretty excited for. My expectations are fairly tame with that show. I haven't been blown away by anything that Lucasfilm Animation has made post Disney Plus era. I really enjoyed Bad Batch. I think it's a very good show. I really enjoyed Tales of the Jedi. The Dooku stuff was a lot better to me than the Ahsoka stuff, but overall a good package. Tales of the Underworld pretty good. Tales of the Empire not very good. I'm hoping for something that takes some swings. I think that's been the big consensus for me across all the products from Lucasfilm Animation post Disney Plus launching, is it just doesn't feel like any of their stuff is taking a swing. And I would love if Maul actually does take a swing. Now, obviously it's bookended. It's a bookended show, which lets it not take quite as big of a swing overall, because you know where Maul ends and you know where he starts. But if it can do stuff that we haven't really seen with the dark side, and maybe continue some of the plot lines that we started in Bad Batch, maybe move some stuff around with how Palpatine's acting at this time, work on some of the stuff with the Sith, maybe maneuver Vader into the story, really go for the stuff with the underworld, connect to Solo a little bit. I think this is primed to be a much more important show than you would have originally thought with something like Maul Shadow Lord. Yeah, they're capitalizing on the fact that Maul is cool and everybody loves him, but there's some room for cool storytelling in here that I think can go beyond just like Maul fighting random person of the week, and eventually he's going to, have a run in with a famous character and they'll fight for an episode and then they'll move on. Like I think it could take the Bad Batch formula and go beyond it a little bit, tell a little bit more important stories. We'll see how long it lasts. But yeah, I would say out of the three, it's close. I might be most excited for Maul Shadow Lord, but I don't know. It'd be hard to pass anything live action. So I'll say Ahsoka season 2 just to see where that's ending. Visions is probably the one I'm least excited for, but I think it's the one that's the most interesting overall for the future of Star Wars animation. I hope it's great, because that could turn into something that becomes my most anticipated Star Wars show every year, with the quality of animation that we can get out of anime studios, and with what we have seen from Ninth Jedi before. So, really looking forward to all three of these, even if none of them are like jumping off the page must see day ones for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird year, like you said, right? Like television has dominated so long when it's come to Star Wars, since the Disney Plus era took over, and now we're back to like, hey, we want the movies to be the biggest thing. We want this to be our guiding light. So what we have is Small Shadow Lord, what we have is Ahsoka season 2, and what we have is that Visions presents. Ah, man, it is tough to choose between them, but I think I'm still most excited by Ahsoka season 2. Filoni has done this over and over again. It's always his second appearance, his, like, second attack at something or his second, chance at doing something in Star Wars that he always does better with. As a showrunner for Clone Wars season 1 to season 2, there's a noticeable jump there. Season 1 to season 2 of Rebels is a very noticeable jump in quality. I think his appearances that he's done after I'm someone who still doesn't truly love that first episode of The Mandalorian. There's just some things that feel a little off to me, but what he's done afterwards since then, I found much stronger for me. So, yeah, as Ahsoka season 1, like we said, kind of peaked around the World Between Worlds, uh, episodes with Anakin and everything. That's again, he directed every single episode too, which is that's a pretty big task for somebody who's only like been tasked with working on 1 or 2 episodes a season max, more around the story and helping Favreau work the world building of the Mandalorian before he kind of switched off to doing his own stuff. So I don't know if he handled it 100% well, right? But they've had 3 years, right? He's essentially having the same time period as George Lucas would between his, movies. Obviously, there's a lot more length to a TV show, but I think someone from a TV background having this much time, I think he'll be able to handle it and appreciate it. Like you said, I'm not the biggest fan of Sabine being force sensitive, or at least the way that they've done her force sensitivity feels a little undermined in some moments. Like I said before on a previous stream, her finally killing that, like, death trooper, zombie death trooper, that's great. I find that's actually pretty solid enough for me, even if I don't love that she is force sensitive. But then it's like, in a moment of, like, force adrenaline, she's almost able to push just as much as Ezra making his jump to, uh, Thrawn's, Lusinki is it the Lusank? No, what's his,
Oh, the
ship called?
Chimera.
The Chimera, right? When he makes that jump to the Chimera. If it was like he made almost 85 to 90% of the jump himself and then was about to miss that cable and she gave him a little bit more of a bump, I'd love that. Like, keep Sabine in a way at like at a, like she's already reaching her limit. It's now she's got to be creative with it. She should almost feel like a Corran Horn where he doesn't have telekinesis, right? And whatever he does have is so minimal and so weak, but he can still use the force in very interesting and different ways. And I hope that's what we're gonna see out of Sabine, that she's still a Mandalorian. She has the force in moments and spurts, but where she's actually able to use the force is more to augment what she already has and make some really interesting new ways of fighting, of defending herself. And maybe she's better at like reading people's minds and feelings than she is about using the force to like just push stuff around, right? So I'm fine with that. I just don't think it was necessary to make her a force sensitive in the first place, but that's Filoni's decision. But everything about Ezra, I really liked how Iman Esfandi handled it. He is the best version of animation to live action by far, not just in looks, but in depiction. So good. And he's really the big reason why I'm excited for the New Republic storyline. Obviously, I want to see more of Hera and Jason. We know Akbar is going to show up this season and everything. So I'm excited to see like these rebellion veterans and what they're going to do for like the first big the conflict of the New Republic era at a military scale to happen. But what does that mean for Ezra now that he's returned to the galaxy? Like, you think a Luke Skywalker is not going to have some sort of effect on him or some communications with him? I think that's an impossibility. All right, so I'm very excited for that. I'm sure we might even see a small Zeb cameo that'll tie into the Mandalorian Grogu. I just don't see anywhere that they don't have at least a little bit of narrative tissue between them with how disconnected he's been with his only appearance in Mando season 3 as a cameo. I'm excited for all the New Republic stuff. The more and more I think about it, and I don't know how much we'll get out of Dathomir and Thrawn, but I expect to see his ship fully repaired. I expect to see a little bit more about the Night Sisters, what the Shadow Council is doing, what the underworld is like. We know the Imperial warlords are going to be in play in the Mandalorian Grogu. I'm just excited to see hopefully a lot of synergy between the film and that second season. I think that's more than anything. If they nail that, that elevates this to not necessarily be the Mandalorian replacement, but you capture closer to a Book of Boba Fett peak audience I think people will be very happy with that. Like, oh, we still have like a big Mandoverse show to follow, and it just also happens to have really interesting things with the Force and all that. Peridia definitely needs to be like made a little bit more interesting, like a little bit less dreary, a little bit more crazy, weird Force stuff with the Mortis gods and everything. I really hope Rory can step into the shoes of Bale and really deliver. I think he can, but I'm very curious to see how a Shinhati, who's basically been ejected from the story, what she does if she's going to be around, what Sabine and Ahsoka do, and maybe deal with some of the choices of Sabine. I don't want it to just be like, "Oh, you're forgiven." I want them to continue to develop more into lively personalities like they were in Rebels, but with a little bit more of the grounded maturity that live action has to offer, and the consequences of putting Ezra back in the galaxy with Thrawn, and all the stuff that's dangerous and lurking on Peridia, and maybe stuff around the Peridia system. All that is very exciting to me, and just the fact that we really don't know too much right now. Like, we've seen some like 80s style like concept art images of some strange like prehistoric robots and all that are like guardian robots or something. Just go weird with it, right? You can keep the more traditional stuff in the New Republic storylines, but go weird on Peridia. Just make it seem like almost like Thrawn left Peridia, not because like he hated it here, but he's like, I'm kind of, oh, this world's a little too crazy for me. I'll handle that stuff later if I ever really want to. Let me get back to what I'm more familiar with, right? And let us as an audience see it through Ahsoka's eyes, through Balin's eyes, Shin's eyes, everybody who's a Force user that might be a little bit more attuned to some of this weirdness on Peridia. So excited, very excited for all of it. Maul Shadow Lord, it's weird. I thought it would probably come out January or February at this point, but we still haven't gotten that trailer. It's actually leaked. That's a correction from Celebration. And we now know that there's a Shadow of Maul comic miniseries that's going to come out in March. So I don't know if that's something that's going to come out before the show, or if that's going to be something set during the show's first half or latter half of the run. It's supposed to serve as a prequel with the underworld, with his effects on that. I think it's going to be told from like the perspective of basically like a police officer who's like hunting down some of Maul's associates and stuff like that. I'm excited, right? If they really do pick up on the stakes and consequences of Crimson Dawn and continue building out the connections to the solo film that may never truly get a sequel other than maybe that Lando movie. But you build up Crimson Dawn, you build up the underworld, you see that Sisyphus character Maul and what he does and reinvent himself once again as. And then if it is truly gonna have a Talon-like character, I'm very curious what of like the original ideas that George Lucas had for that character and making that apprenticeship work. How's that compared to a Savage Oppress and Maul apprenticeship? How does he avoid the scrutiny of Maul and now Vader? Do we get by the end of the show something that jumps every season and take big swings, like you're saying, Liam, to get us a little bit more creatively in line with more impactful stories in this time period in the Dark Ages of the Empire's early rule and get him stuck on Malachor? I'm not sure, but that first season is gonna hold a lot of potential. I'd love for them to make like the arcs feel a little bit more Clone Wars esque instead of just linear progression where we have small mini jumps more and more throughout the years. I think that's how you can really distinguish it from everything we've seen in the Bad Batch. If this is a place that we get the Pat storyline told too, now that we've got Asajj Ventress back and Quinlan back, and we've already seen them in Tales of the Underworld, that would be awesome. But I'm not really sure if that's going to be something that necessarily fits in, unless they're going for the angle of maybe Maul rats out Asajj or Quinlan and gets one of them killed closer to the time of Kenobi, and that's how he avoids the scrutiny. Like Palpatine lets him play around in the underworld for a little bit longer until he's finally gotten sick of him, and then sends Vader out to kill him or something like that. I don't know. There's just a lot of things about the power plays of Crimson Dawn that I think have massive potential. But is this a show that's going to be about him immediately building up Crimson Dawn, or like working this apprenticeship angle again? Well, I don't know. We'd know more if we get a full trailer. So I think that's the big thing for me. At least we know what's the basis of Ahsoka. We still don't know quite literally what the basis of Maul Shadow Lord is. And then that puts Visions in third, right? Like I'm excited for the Ninth Jedi. You can see on the review, I'm more of a fan of the first short than I am the second. I think it was a mistake to have some CGI replacement instead of using 2D animation for some of the fight stuff. That's some of the stuff that Ninth Jedi was most famous for the fluidity of its 2D animation. So I'm hoping they avoid that. I'll only use it where it amplifies and is necessary, like for some large scale walker or something like that. But I did like some of the world building in the second short. I did enjoy Child of Hope actually giving our lead character, a little bit more sympathy of an angle. Like, she is overwhelmed. This is a lot. Even if they are working together, she's still a kid. So I'm looking forward to where they're picking it up, and I hope they do a little bit of a recap of the first two shorts. If this is going to kind of stand alone, I still think you need to like catch up people who may never jump into Visions and see it that way, or keep it as like a little mini section attached under its Disney Plus section, kind of like how Rebels had the Rebel shorts prior to the Rebel season one. You have to do something like that to make it easier for people to be caught up on the story. But it's hard to tell what there could be in there. Like Liam said, I want to see new studios have a way to kind of creep into animation. Clone Wars animation is lovely, but it is at this point 2 decades old, essentially. I'd love to see us actually have new voices and new animation techniques. That's the one thing I always appreciate, like Star Wars Resistance, for going for that cell shaded animation. Some of it was beautiful, but it just would have been maybe better appreciated if we had a lot more of a serious and more hefty story that came from that show. So, Vision's third, Maul Shadow Lord second, and Ahsoka season 2 as my first.
Yeah, and I'm with you on the Maul Shadow Lord being at the earliest March. I have a feeling that this Maul comic is going to come out before, but I wouldn't be shocked if Maul Shadow Lord is our May 4th release this year. Bad Batch season 1, people forget, was a May 4th drop. It was something that they kind of used the Star Wars hype to try to get people onto a show they kind of weren't necessarily sure people would watch. I think Maul has a lot higher ceiling in terms of viewership than Bad Batch ever would have. You know, even if Bad Batch was consensus the greatest Star Wars show ever after one season, there was no way it was going to get the viewership as it was coming out as Clone Wars or Rebels. So I think Maul has that ability to get non animated Star Wars fans or people who haven't watched animated Star Wars since Clone Wars on board with Star Wars. And that's why it's a safe move, but one that I hope actually has some way to push boundaries. I do firmly believe it will be the first show of the year, just purely because I don't know when anything else could come out from it. Like I think Ahsoka will be our end of the year show. I think it will be the big show they're pushing towards the second half of this year on Disney Plus, because we do have a bunch of Marvel shows that are supposed to be coming out that have all had marketing, that have all been, you know, plugged for years now. And Ahsoka season 2 has zero marketing so far, and not even, a leaked trailer with anything besides concept art. So I think that's pretty late this year. Earliest is end of August, beginning of September. It could end up being kind of that Andor season 1 date of beginning of October through November. It would be a way to keep Star Wars around at that time of the year when we're building towards Doomsday, because Marvel will dominate the midsummer with Spider-Man and it will dominate the winter with Doomsday. So we'll see how they want to stagger those two franchise releases, because I think Star Wars, not that Ahsoka is ever going to really rival anything to do with Marvel, but it's something that if they wanted to bring Star Wars into the second half of the year, they could do so with that, and see how the summer is with Maul. Normally, TV tries to avoid the summer because it's a movie season and people are gone and they're out of town. They don't have time to devote to watching an episode of TV every single week. They're busy. They've got a lot of other personal activities going on, but they might with an animated show. I think Visions is going to be something that they don't treat as one of these mainstream Star Wars shows. I could see it coming out anytime in the second half of the year. I would be shocked if it comes out before May. I could see it being our summer May the 4th release as well. The only thing that leads me away from that is we haven't had any marketing for it at all. No trailer, no leaked trailer, no nothing. It's more of just like a surprise announcement. Oh, it's coming next year. But we haven't seen anything for it. They could theoretically look at maybe Vision season 3, excuse me, as marketing for it and then just kind of try to throw it together, get it out. But I think to see when Visions is coming out would be more so we should more so look at the calendar of anime releases in Japan because they're going to try to sell this as a an anime that you should watch. The real goal of this is yes to get Western audiences interested in Star Wars if they're anime lovers and they don't watch Star Wars, but it's more so to get international audiences interested in Star Wars. So I think it'll be less predicated on what the trends are in the United States and more so predicated on the trends of foreign countries, especially Japan. So we'll see what the calendar is like for that. And it'll also be interesting to see if they run it the same way that most anime release, which is dropped in Japan with, only Japanese language and English subtitles, and then dropped, 6 months later with a dub. We've seen recently that strategy has worked, obviously very, very well. Something like Demon Slayer has done that with their new seasons. They've dropped like these they call them movies, but they're really just the first episode of the next season and the last episode of the previous season. They've combined them, put them in a theater. They're only in Japanese, and people have shown up to watch them. And because they did it, everybody else started following. So there's been a lot of those types of movies out recently. Would Visions consider doing that with the first two episodes from Visions and combine them with the Ninth Jedi premiere episode and make it a theatrical event? That would be really interesting. I think that would be something pretty cool. Would they consider dropping it that way, just purely in Japanese, and then having kind of almost two releases for it? If you're somebody who doesn't want to watch it in Japanese, redropping it, with the English dub next year or at the end of the year, they could look at it that way as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach the release of Visions because if they try to make it too westernized, I think they'll lose a little bit of their flair and like lose a little bit of the support of people who want it to be like a pure anime. So we'll see how they decide to approach it. We'll take your guys' questions now about the TV shows. If we have time, we'll get to the books coming out next year because there really aren't very many. But if we don't, we'll save that for next week. So we've got here, let's scroll back up. We had our first one, I believe, pertaining to the TV shows was HD GameTube, who says, I really hope Quinlan Voss shows up in Maul Shadow Lord. If not, then Jedi 3 because of the hidden path. He's so underrated or so underused, excuse me. It's a shame. About Quinlan, my theory is that they introduce his new model in Tales of the Underworld to maybe use him in Maul Shadow Lord, just like other characters such as Grievous for 5 seconds in Clone Wars Season 7. I think you would be pretty accurate in terms of that Quinlan is coming back. I don't know if it's exactly a guarantee for Maul Shadow Lord, as much as I think he could be in whatever their next season of Tales of is. We've talked a lot about over the last few years about a spin-off show with him and Asajj. It looked like that was going to be happening, but then they kind of pulled back a little bit on it in Tales of the Underworld in the finale. We'll see if they decide to go any further with Asajj. But I think one of the interesting things is that if at this time period, because the Jedi are in hiding, because the Path is operating basically as a criminal organization, ferrying Jedi across the galaxy and hiding them, smuggling them, for lack of a better word, you can put them in a underworld show like Maul Shadow Lord, and it would actually flow and make sense with maybe some arc or some part of the storytelling from Maul. Where it gets shady is that Maul doesn't necessarily like any Jedi, and I don't know how well that would go. I think it would be not necessarily Maul working with them; he'd be more so antagonistic against them. Maybe they just disrupt something he's doing, and he has to take them on. He kills a couple random Jedi we've never heard of, and it does bring Quinlan in for an episode. I would be shocked if Ventress doesn't show up for an episode at some point in this show. I think she has a higher chance than Quinlan personally, but I do think those assets, they're created for a reason. I absolutely think there's a strong possibility. I would even give you greater than 50% chance that both of them show up in one season of this show. I won't guarantee that it's this season, but I think you can get a much greater than 50% chance that both of them could show up. And I would love to see it. As somebody who's a big fan of Quinlan, as somebody who loves that book, and as somebody who really wants some answers for why we should have brought Ventress back to life, because I don't think narratively I've seen any purpose for it. I know why she's alive, but I don't see a reason for her to be alive personally because of how much I love the book. I really am open to more and more storytelling with both of those characters because that's the only way we're going to ever get our answers around those. So if it's Maul Shadow Lord and that's our start towards maybe something else in the future, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same feelings because, especially on that last point, why would you almost do like an essential backdoor pilot to having her over the three shorts of Tales of the Underworld, right? I just don't see why you would do that and then like wait until after Maul Shadow Lord to then attack that role, right? Like you've already had her tested out in Bad Batch season 3 that it traditionally has always kind of been the backdoor pilot. We've seen Grievous's upgraded model in the season 7 final arc, kind of replaying some of the opening scenes of Revenge of the Sith. And we're like, okay, where's that going to show up? Finally shows up in Tales of the Empire when he has his whole massacre of Dathomir kind of played out in a different way. So if we've seen these in back-to-back years, to me, it does feel like she's going to have at least some role in Maul Shadow Lord. Though I could also see this just be like we're gonna have Quinlan first, right, and see how he like is associated with the underworld. If there are some contacts from Dark Disciple from his time leading Dooku's armies, and just a little bit more pulling from the Star Wars Republic comics about his abilities, about his skills, and what he's done to avoid detection and help out these, his own version of the criminals, right, as labeled by the Empire. So that'll be very interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, I just expect it to be a bit underused. I'd hope they have a connection in Jedi 3. I was a big proponent of having, you know, the Inquisitor character from Obi-Wan Kenobi, Riva, actually show up in Jedi Survivor, just because we've been in that same exact time period. Would have been a great way to close off the character story, have a lot of interplay between the two mediums. I just don't expect that to happen now. I think that was probably one of the best chances you could have had in storytelling. Here, is it a necessity for us to like go back to the path for a third story after now kind of taking over leadership of the path and being sequestered away? Not quite sure. I just don't. I mean, I don't think Cal's going to be stuck on that planet forever, but I do imagine it'll be some time away from the rest of the path and their associates. So very curious how it'll all play out. I'm not gonna lie, but yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting, but mm, I hope it means that we get to see Asajj and Asajj Ventress and Quinlan and possibly Maul have some sort of interplay in an arc. Again, I want this show to have a little bit more of arcs as opposed to just the Bad Batch formula of like one or two little um episodes that like work back to back. So that's just me personally.
We got a super chat from Toydarian Dan. Thank you so much for the support. Saying 40K subs, congrats, keep up the great work, great content and informative chats. Question: you get invited to have dinner with George Lucas, but it's the same night as your best friend's wedding, and you are the best man. What do you do and why? Wow. Well, thank you so much for the support. Really appreciate that. And yeah, we did hit a pretty big milestone, 40K subs this week. Pretty excited about that. Our channel is growing despite this being a slow year for the world of Star Wars. It does feel like we are continuing to grow. So we really appreciate all of you who watch along and comment and participate and really help us and support us through this slower time, especially of Star Wars, but just in general across our whole channel. We obviously wouldn't be here without you guys. So really appreciate that. And thank you, Toydarian Dan, for the super chat. As for the question, Oh man. That's a tough one. I mean, I would want to say that I would be loyal to my friend and be there at his wedding. Maybe the wedding would be prior to the dinner, and then I could skip out for the dinner if it was close by, uh, and then come back later and pretend like I was there the whole time. I think my friend would also understand if I missed the dinner portion, but was there for the actual wedding part, because it's George Lucas and they know me. But also, you know, it's George Lucas. So I don't know. That's one of the harder questions I think we've ever been asked on the channel.
Yeah, that's wow. That's definitely a pickle to be in for sure. I would still say go to my friend's wedding. I mean, especially if you're the best man. I'm assuming your relationship with this person is very close, and you'd have it be very outlined about your dynamic and the roles and responsibilities. You probably have something to do with the bachelor party and everything too. So it's going to be months of process leading to this point, right? So I just don't personally see a dinner with Lucas being something as tempting as it could be to, like, take over something as special as, like, a good friend's wedding or a very close friend's wedding. And you have to also consider, like, what sort of dinner is this with Lucas? Is this like I'm invited with, like, 20 other influencers and Star Wars
That's a good
fans?
point.
It's like, "Oh, okay. Like, cool." But if it's like George is like, "Hey, buddy, I wanna talk about some cool things with you," and, like, personally talk to me, yeah, then that changes the stakes. Like, if it's a very much a personal sit down dinner, like those questions that people have of like, "Oh, anyone dead or alive that you can have dinner with, or who would you choose?" If it's kind of sort of that sort of situation where it's like, and you're guaranteed time and space with this, like, yeah, I think that changes the stakes. But if if the maker himself, the main man George, asks me and I have to tell him, "Hey man, I really would love to have dinner with you, but I just happen to have my best friend's wedding or something." I think if it's really meant to be, we'll find another date. All right. If it's like, no, like this is the only date we're gonna do it, whatever. And if I'm also taking it in a little bit more of a funny slash cynical angle, I've never fully seen Community, the TV show, but one of the characters, Troy, is like, "I never want to meet my heroes," and his hero is LeVar Burton from Reading Rainbow, and he just breaks down. He's like, "It'll just ruin it for me." Now it's like the whole image is gone. And maybe in some way, as Star Wars fans, like, yeah, we've seen so many people who met Filoni, who met Kathleen Kennedy, Favreau, and all that. But George Lucas is almost like, for me, like almost two generations away from current Star Wars at this point. So it's like almost seeing like a ghost and seeing who he is now, this many years away from Star Wars. Like if I have to, I mean, I'll be honest. Like I could probably talk about Indiana Jones and some other cool things ILM did, but at some point the conversation is going to default to something about Star Wars. And then what if he has like a negative reaction or he doesn't want to really talk about it? That would almost like hurt it for me a little bit, like that perfect image that we have around him, right? Despite the guy documenting everything about him, we can almost idolize some of his flaws too with the prequels and stuff like that. If I suddenly meet like an 80 something year old George Lucas and he's like, "Man, I hate this and this. I would have changed this about like Empire Strikes Back. Like it doesn't work for me." I don't know. Maybe that actually is something that I just don't want to like even touch. Like I want him to just be like, yes, he's the creator and that's it. That's all I want. But if it's just a cool little dinner, just to like visit Skywalker Ranch and just talk up some cool ideas, maybe work on one of his private short films and keep that between us, I'd be so down. But I think in this case, I'd still have to be like, George, I gotta go to my best friend's wedding.
I think I would ask if I could just invite one more person to the wedding and invite him as
Oh,
well,
that'd be
and
cool.
then
That'd
sit
be
with
cool.
him there. Maybe that's the workaround. Yeah, yeah, it would be tough to it would be tough to miss your best friend's wedding if you're the best man. Um, so yeah, but great question. Thank you so much for the support. We really appreciate the super chat and all the support you've given us throughout the years. Really appreciate that. So thank you. And some of the comments people are saying, Dale Skywalker says, "How much do you like your best friend?" Edisai says, "Not that blunt." Also says, "It's the opportunity to ask about the wills, how they look like to have an answer to the big questions. Yeah, I mean, that's what I would love to talk about with George is just continue to understand Star Wars better, you know? Like we all think we're experts, but nobody's as much of an expert as the person who literally created it. So, you can never know more than he can. He can even when I clip things out for our shorts and all stuff like that, I still feel like I'm learning stuff every single time I hear him talk about Star Wars. So, it would be awesome to just speak with him about it in a fashion where he actually wanted to. That's the other thing I would be assuming. He actually wanted to talk about Star Wars. But yeah, thank you so much for the support and for the question. Going back to the TV show questions, we had, let's see, where were we here? I think it was Dale Skywalker said, are they going heavy on Zepho technology or are they bringing in Abeloth for Ahsoka season 2? I would just be I was always out on Abeloth on like, I just don't think it's happening. It's obviously a concept that was created for extended EU and not a part of the original Mortis stuff with Filoni's episodes, right? So that right off the bat makes it a little less likely because Filoni, as much as he does bring in other things from the EU into his work, when he creates something, he has that George Lucas approach of it's like he's sticking to what his vision was. So I've always been kind of out on Abeloth as a even just possibility for this show. When I started thinking about it after we started getting all those questions in 2023 about it, I thought it was a cool idea to have her a part of it, but that was always assuming to me that the entire season of season 2 was focused on Sabine, Ahsoka, Baylan, Shin. Like just the Peridia story and the Mortis stuff and all of that would connect into it. But that doesn't seem to be the case from the leaked concept art trailer. It looks like they're focusing on everything, which I'm very concerned about. It's the thing that's holding me back from really being too excited about Ahsoka season 2 is just that I thought season 1 bit off more than it could chew, and season 1 was a lot more streamlined of a story. Season 2 is gonna be taking place in 2 different galaxies again, but this time we're going to be seeing the perspectives of both galaxies, right? So it's gonna be cross-cutting, not just different events in the same place, but different events in 2 completely different galaxies. And both of them seem so disassociated with each other, right? Like, Sabine and Ahsoka's attempt to get home, coupling that with whatever Baylan's doing with the Mortis gods, and Shin with her Marauder gang. And then back in our galaxy, the main Star Wars galaxy, we've got Thrawn on Dathomir. We've got uh, Hera and Ezra and the New Republic, and rumors about Leia being in the show, and whatever the military's doing, and all of the early battles between Thrawn and the New Republic. There's so many things happening in 8 episodes again, and I'm just very concerned about that. I feel like if you add an Abeloth level threat and you just close it out in like episode 4 to get Ahsoka back to the main galaxy, it's not going to do anybody justice. It's not going to do the character justice. It's going to make Legends fans upset. It's just going to be kind of something that I feel like falls flat. So personally, I'm out on Abeloth. I just don't really see a way in which the story they've constructed fits a character of that magnitude. Zepho, I would love to see more of. There's a lot of hints towards it. Again, like I said earlier, Dave Filoni likes to stick to the Dave Filoni stuff. So I don't necessarily see there being incredible significance to Zepho as a like we're going to see a bunch of it and we're going to continue to learn more about the backstory, but we could still see a lot of Easter eggs about Zepho and all their connections like we did in season 1. So I would love to see Zepho. I don't think the show can handle Abeloth, but we shall see where it goes.
It's pretty interesting that the Zepho marking showed up in Ahsoka, but also in Skeleton Crew. It's like, oh, is there supposed to be some sort of connection there? There were some super early on rumors that maybe there's going to be an episode of Ahsoka season 2 where the kids almost like run into her or something, or sorry, her appearing in Skeleton Crew as like the big cameo sorts. I don't know if that's gonna happen anymore, but I'm very curious to see if, like, the Zepho almost escaped that galaxy that Peridia's in because they were terrified of the powers that to be on Peridia and all that, so yeah, I don't know. It's tough. It is tough to say that if we get into Abeloth. I mean, even how Abeloth is written, right? She is in some ways arguably like the ultimate retcon to all of Legends, right? She's a character that's introduced that has an effect on Callista Ming. She's a character that ties into Centerpoint Station, Sinkhole Station. She's a character that actively is written around a very new arc at that point, the Mortis arc in Clone Wars with the son, daughter, and the father. She's not a celestial. She is someone who becomes corrupted and feeds off of people's violence and conflict with each other. I I don't know. I don't know. It's a character that as it was written in Fate of the Jedi, I just don't see. I think we get to see maybe a mother character. And maybe we can get a version of that through Shin if she's like more willing to chase down and almost upend what Balin is trying to do with like changing the past, controlling destiny, stopping this constant violence and conflict as he sees it, right? Maybe that would then bring Shin to like take that plunge of sorts, quite literally and figuratively. I just like Liam said, I just don't see how it's gonna happen. Like for I just don't believe it because we've seen Netflix only now with like season 4 and season 5 Stranger Things really push the envelope of hey, every episode can be a totally different length. Disney Plus does that too, but in a almost traditional sense of like, yes, anything can be any episode length, but shorter, right? And that's still the biggest thing that we have to really overcome with Disney Plus. If with how much story is being done, split between New Republic seemingly and Peridia, I'm really hoping that these episodes are longer and there's more talking and discussions going on. Uh, they shifted everything to Pinewood. It's not going to be as volume based, so maybe they do save money, and that's why the budget is technically rumored to be lower. But how does that counter out with telling the story properly and spreading it out and actually making the pacing seem right? There's definitely pacing issues in Ahsoka. Part of it's because like you're trying to assume like a Rebel season 5 with Ahsoka as the lead happens as a prologue that you never get to see. Takes a while to get going into the Peridia conflict. Once we're there, it's peaks for 2 episodes, and then it's kinda drags itself out instead of, like, actually sinking its teeth in. It's like, "Okay, now we're at this point where we have to rush towards the ending, and we have to just fill in some of the gaps later in season 2." It's got weird pacing to it. It's probably the most weirdly paced season of any show that Filoni's done besides maybe Rebel season 1, but you can excuse that. That's a TVY7. This is a live action PG-13 production. There's more expectations around it. So I'm hoping if they are going to do something with the mother, it's because they have a guarantee of doing like 65, 70-minute episodes. This will be a final complete season for Ahsoka. And if they are trying to do stuff with the mother, you have to guarantee us a season 3. I think she'd have to be a character that shows up, influences, and shapes things. Maybe she's the one who called Balin in the first place to this, all everything on Peridia. And that's what he's actually sensing. But I don't think she should truly be fully realized until like a season 3 as a character, as a villain to fight against. And I just don't see the show necessarily having space for super long episodes like a Stranger Things season 4 and 5 and having a third season. I just think that we're moving away from this movie stretched out into TV show format for all franchises under Disney. And if we are to get longer episodes, because the budget is significantly lower, and no matter how much they're saving on reusing sets and all that, they're still moving halfway across the world and dealing with whole different labor laws and the fact that you have to take a big bump up in quality in season 2, and regardless of how people either loved or were a little miffed by season 1.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm not counting out references to Abeloth for sure. There can be references. You could even have an appearance. I just don't see Abeloth as the like ultimate villain that a lot of people are portraying in their theories since 2023 when Ahsoka came out. So, but yeah, that's how I feel. And then HD Game Tube asks if the Zephyr were introduced in the lore in Jedi Fallen Order. Yeah, that's where their first appearance was. Scrolling back up to the top, we had, let's see, Batasai says, I'm 90% sure we'll get the Vader versus Maul duel in Maul Shadow Lord. I'm with you. I think there's a night, I would say even 100% chance we'll see it at some point. I just don't know if it'll be in season one. I'm assuming Maul Shadow Lord is going to be planned for at least a couple seasons. Bad Batch itself was planned out for at least that second season prior to season one dropping, just kind of the way they have to do it with animation. It also seems to make for a little bit better show when you have a plan. But they, I would imagine they would feel pretty strong about the mall show. I think that's why they're going in this direction. So I would be shocked if we don't at least get two seasons. But I would love to see the Maul versus Vader stuff come into the fold, especially if Maul starts to become a problem for Palpatine again. Vader is his ultimate enforcer at this time. I think you absolutely use him. Badasai also says, here's another hot take. I think I would be curious of a new animation art style, but the Clone Wars animation, because of it, it was designed and approved by George Lucas, has a certain official status when it comes to telling some key stories in between the saga, not to mention the prevalence that it has had in the facts that the Clone Wars, Bad Batch, Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire, Rebels in a way. Although I would not be that purist on that because you can't logically extrapolate that status out of the decision Lucas made for the Clone Wars after all. So I think what you're saying is basically you would be open to more animation styles, but to you, Clone Wars animation will always be the Star Wars animation style because it was originally founded under George Lucas. And I'm not necessarily because it's connected to George Lucas do I feel that, but just because it's the one we've seen the most, it's the one that makes me feel the most Star Wars. So I would agree with you on that. Like when I see it, it makes me feel, Star Wars feelings the way you do in some cases with the films, right? It just invokes that spirit. I don't know if that's maybe it can be credited to Lucas and helping him helping bring the magic because, as great as the Disney movies look, there is something that's truly a tourist about the way George Lucas directs. If you watch those prequels, like there's just something different about the way his worlds were brought to life from modern filmmaking without him. And maybe it is similarly with animation, but I think because George isn't necessarily somebody who was an animator, somebody who was involved with the actual like creation of the animation, more so involved with the creation of the stories themselves, the way the shots were selected, the way they structured things. And Dave Filoni's talked about this a lot about George Lucas really pushing them to say, "Hey, let's make this look like a movie, not like TV. Let's make this actually look like it's something that has really important high value shot selection, really interesting shot selection versus making it just look like a TV show." I think that's where you get the little bit of the George Lucas stamp, but really to me, it is just the fact that we've seen it the most. It does feel the most Star Wars in that sense. So I'm with you there. But I think also in that same vein, if we start to see other animation styles consistently, we'd get a little more desensitized to like, well, it's Clone Wars or bust, because at some point we'll have stories that are at the level of most of the stuff in the Clone Wars animation style, but with other animation. And if you get to that point, then it's really more about the stories being told. And we could have, something that really takes the medium of Star Wars and uses it to create an animation style that's wholly unique to it. Same way like Spider Verse has done, where it's used this kind of jumpy animation style to simulate a comic. I think you could use the visual iconography of Star Wars and the way George Lucas crafted his Star Wars to craft an animation style that's a little bit more indicative of what George would do if he had unlimited resources towards an animation style. So there are a lot of possibilities there for sure.
Yeah, no, I get your point about O3 Clone Wars with Genndy Tartakovsky and his animation style, what he started with Dexter's Laboratory, what he essentially perfected with Samurai Jack, and then brought back with Symbionic Titan, Primal, and obviously Clone Wars being another big achievement of his. Yes, like I would love to see more, but I do agree with Liam too, and what you better said that like it does feel like the official heavy hitting animation stories that feel in line with stuff we see in live action. Always is going to be the Clone Wars style. And I don't hate it. I've always been someone as a more of a proponent of like every style of Star Wars should influence and shape and improve and create new things out of it. I think at some point, like a big problem that people had, especially in like the early days post sequel trilogy and the later stage of the sequel trilogy release, was that it felt like these were Star Wars movies that were only referencing Star Wars movies to kind of build out their story at points, as opposed to what influenced George Lucas. Like, what are some other cool things that we've seen in fantasy and science fiction that can shape this universe, right? Star Wars has always been an amalgamation. It's never really been one thing, right? And from the remix that comes out of Star Wars formula, new things can be achieved. So it does feel like sticking to this is almost a necessity because Lucas poured millions out of pocket during the Clone Wars to make this better and better and better. And now it's like, yeah, if I have a choice between a whole new animation style and a animation style that I know is great, I just have to pump like $10,000 into versus 3 million over 5 years. Which one's gonna be, supported more than likely by Disney? Definitely the choice with the Clone Wars. So I think some of it comes down to just for business sense, it's just best to stick with an animation style that you've perfected to some degree. There isn't a lot of 3D animation even under the Disney banner for their TV shows and everything that kind of touches anything close to what we see with Clone Wars. Maybe in the early 2010s, not now. I think the way season 7 Clone Wars looked, and then the extra leap that took in Bad Batch and what we see in Front Tales of the Jedi Empire and Underworld, it's really damn good. Like it's hard to say that it's bad now. There is no like mannequinness of it anymore. There is such strong fluidity. The lighting is so great. They've definitely improved their lighting and their shadows and their fluidity from what they learned on Rebels. But at the same time, it's not like Disney didn't create resistance, right? Like, it's not like we haven't seen them experiment. I'd love to see them go more into 2D animation again. It's unfortunate to say that so many people who work at like Walt Disney Animation Studios, when they see the success of anime and all that, they're like, it's not that we don't want to do it. It's just that we don't know how anymore. And that's a big shame. So much of the Western world has lost a lot of what made 2D animation come out in the first place here. And the way to do it under the conditions that anime studios have, on how underpaid those workers are, how often they're overworked. It's just not something that maybe that could easily work out for a Disney-owned Star Wars to do. It would almost be like 3, 4, 5 different animation studios would have to be contracted to work on a TV show, and then someone would have to be the one that overrules it for consistency's sake and everything, versus what and what will always be there with models that have already been assets that you can just modify a couple times and make whole new characters out of for 3D animation. So I agree with you. I still like it how it's being used. I just hope that one day we get like an official Star Wars canon anime, right? With stuff like Luke's Academy or something, some big story that makes us be like, yeah, if you don't watch, you don't watch it. But people who do watch it are going to see some insane action, who are going to see some great line work. We're gonna see some great performances and voice acting. I know there's always gonna be that feeling that 3D always makes it a little bit more hefty in people's canonicity, but it's such a shame because these are the same people who grew up watching O3 Clone Wars and those microsodes. And if they're even older, grew up watching droids and Ewoks, which were the first real incursions into animation under Star Wars banner. So I think 2D animation still has a place. I just don't know if it has a place under Disney's ownership of Star Wars, but I hope that, we see Visions really explode with all these spin-off series and we get to see some big like canon forward stories be set in this.
Well, let me run down the books and the comics that are coming out next year, and then we'll get to a last few questions, and then we're gonna have to wrap it up. This is a longer stream, back to our old school stream days, but we wanted to get in, the conversation around 2026 here as the year starts to wrap up. But let's run down the books because unlike this year where we had 8 Star Wars books come out, and it was going to be a big year for Star Wars before we even found out about some of the later releases because of the High Republic wrapping up and all that. 2026 does not look like a very exciting year for Star Wars books, at least from my personal standpoint. So, as of now, we know about 4 Star Wars books, and they do cover the span of the whole year, which I think is pretty important because that means we might not get any more for the rest of 2026. And I wouldn't be shocked because they really seem to be gearing up for 2027 that's going to have a ton of stuff. And so, wouldn't be shocking if 2026 with High Republic ending in 2025 is kind of a retool year, some filler stories, and then we get stuff in 2027 that's maybe like the launch of a new initiative or something like that. But we do have a book starting out February 3rd, so not too far away. It's beginning with Outlaws Low Red Moon. This is being written by Mike Chen, which is the only reason I'm excited for this at all. This is the origin story, basically, of the characters of Indy 5 and Jalen Vrax. It's a story tying into the Outlaws video game, similarly to the Acolyte tie-ins, which, neither one of us really liked. It's a little too late for an Outlaws story over a year and a half after the game came out, and with no real second life to the game, even with its DLC. This seems like something that will come and go very quickly, but it is being written by Mike Chen, and that does add a little bit of gravitas to it. It is coming out February 3rd for those interested. Then we have a really big gap between that book and our next announced Star Wars book, and that is Eyes Like Stars. This is unclear what exact style it is going to be written in, whether it's adult or young adult. Wikipedia has it listed as young adult because it is going to be published by Lucasfilm Press, who usually publishes the young adult books. However, this story is supposed to be the beginning of a new genre initiative for Star Wars, where they're going to be telling different stories in a variety of different genres. This first one is an attempt to capitalize on the craze right now of fantasy kind of fantasy YA-esque stories, but really with a lot more adult themes than YA really have ever had. I'm sure this will still be tame because it's Star Wars, but it's Eyes Like Stars, written by Ashley Poston. This is coming out July 21st, 2026. So a real long wait for Eyes Like Stars. Then we go to our next book, which is going to be Star Wars Legacy. No, not with Cade Skywalker. This time it's a book with Rey Skywalker, taking place in between episode 8 and 9. It is written by Madeline Rowe, who is a new Star Wars author, and it is going to be chronicling kind of the journey between Rey and Princess Leia as Leia takes over as Rey's master after the death of Luke, and Rey continues her training in between 8 and 9. And then our final book that we know of for the year is, and the last adult book we know about, is going to be Reign of the Empire, Edge of the Abyss. This is the second book in the Reign of the Empire trilogy, which began this past year with Mask of Fear. This one is releasing in the fall, and it is written by, let me scroll through here. It is written by Rebecca Rowanhorse, who wrote Resistance Reborn. That is her other work in Star Wars. As a big fan of Mask of Fear, I'm very excited to see what Edge of the Abyss is going to be. I didn't love Resistance Reborn, so I'm hoping for a little bit of redemption for Rebecca Rowanhorse with that book. That is easily my most anticipated of these 4 for next year. After that, it's hard to pick. I would go with Legacy just because it has the most implication on the films as my second most anticipated book of next year. Personally, I don't have that much interest in it, and new Star Wars authors have been very hit and miss. But I want more stuff with Leia in between 8 and 9, more so than even Rey. I'm kind of interested in the Leia aspect of this story because we get so little of her in 9. and especially her death kind of comes at a very abrupt moment. I would love to get a little bit more into her head between those movies. More Ray work is always welcomed as well because we don't have much of it, especially in novels. We've barely seen any of Ray. So it will be a welcome addition. I just really don't expect much of importance from this book. Then I guess my third most anticipated would be Outlaws, almost exclusively because of Mike Chen, but I really don't care about the story. I think it could be a fun one. I think it could honestly be one of those that in a few years we're like, yeah, Outlaws Low Red Moon was a really underrated book that nobody talks about because the characters themselves are like some of the better characters in the game. I really liked Indy 5 in the game. Jalen was all right in the game as well. So some of the more underrated characters in the game, and it's Mike Chen and his sophomore Star Wars effort. So I'm looking forward to it, seeing what he can do if he can elevate characters that I've kind of forgotten about and a story in a time period that I really don't care about into a little bit higher place. But other than that, I'm not really interested in Outlaws. I played it, enjoyed it for what it was at the time, moved on, haven't touched it since 2024. And then last is Eyes Like Stars. I'm just not a romance novel person. I could really care less about Star Wars having a romance series, but I'm excited for what comes after because they mentioned a horror series possibly coming, an action adventure series, a thriller series. I'm excited for all those other genres. This one's just not for me, but I will be reading it, and it could be a pleasant surprise like the last time Star Wars really went in with a romance novel that I didn't care about at all, and that was Lost Stars. So we'll see if this one can be a Lost Stars or if it's going to be a swing and a miss. But son, I got all these four books. Which one stands out to you the most, and which one are you most excited for?
I mean, I'm gonna have to say Legacy. I think I have higher expectations for it simply because I want to see how they make up for the fact that Carrie Fisher did not get to be Leia. Like when we first heard this news, I was like, this is the greatest opportunity to actually tell Leia's story and not have to be like, oh, we're gonna save it for animation, all this and that, and like comics. Like her stuff in Allegiance is whatever. It's such a minor role that you still have so much that she can do, but actually training everything to do with her and Ray and what it means to step in that role after stepping away from using the Force so ambitiously as you once wanted to, right? So absolutely want to get a little bit more insight on what's going to go on with why she stepped away personally, not just from what Luke said with the vision about Ben. Want to see what it's like for them to go to Titan now that we've seen Titan in live action with Grogu, now that we've seen it in comics, we've seen it in Shadow of the Sith as well. It's become a little bit more of a hotbed, and we can use this as a way to like say, oh, this is like a little bit of elements that are being kind of pushed from this book into that. Like we've been talking about this too. We need to see more of these standalone books have some connective tissue, like shared, not plot lines per se, but references and like a character cameo or something like that. And I think this is a great book to do that finally. And just what is that dynamic like? I mean, at the end of the day, Leia is going to be training the daughter of sorts of her greatest enemy, right? Of someone who has shaped and affected her father, killed her mother in many ways, and hurt her brother, and then seemingly has been having some sort of influence even post death on her son and everything in the fall there. So yeah, I want to see that dynamic. I want to see what comes out of it. Very excited for it, and I think the fact that we don't have like a High Republic anymore to dominate so much of storytelling and just like it's exhausted the writers that were behind the whole initiative that I'm thinking that maybe in a year where we don't have any new big initiative plan, maybe this is the first time we get something pushed out there in these more standalone books that make them feel a little bit more hefty and weightier because it's not like we haven't had it. We have a Shadow of Sith, we have a Bloodline. We are capable of these standalone books like a Phasma and all that to really chew and do more with their characters. And with this being such a small little gap for Leia and this possibly being her biggest story, I I really hope they really nail this one and make this feel like a definitive, like must read in a lot of ways. Like Shadow of the Sith has almost become a very definitive must read for people who are fans of the sequel trilogy. So that's my first. Second, man, this is tough. This is tough. I would say this got to be the Mike Chen Moon. Under the Low Red Moon. I just like him as a writer. I know Brotherhood, when we both first read it, we were like, wow, it's amazing. And then it kind of just disappeared pretty quickly. But I don't. Anytime I like look back at elements and reading about some certain things, I'm like, no, it was really solid. It's just he was put into like a very tight gap of sorts, a very specific scenario, and then he himself put some boundaries about like, I want this to be a book that when you read it, like that other time on Kid and Emodia doesn't count, can be the one that's there in Stover's adaptation and all those other books that he wrote leading into it. And it's just like, that's cool, Mike. I love that you were trying to make this almost like a book that doesn't contradict Legends and fits in with canon, but it's already a very small window, right? And the best parts that came out of it were like, why the hell are Jedi like so militarized and wearing armor? We see the whole explanation of that act. We understand a lot more about Anakin and Padme and the role of him becoming a Jedi Knight. Some hints about some other things that have been going on. We see basically a lot of that first day of the war in '03 Clone Wars be canonized and everything. So, really great book in that sense. But the actual material, I can see the argument that, like, other than the dynamic between Anakin and Obi-Wan, it is a bit soft. Versus here with ND5, I just think that we have a whole open range. Like, there's nothing in Outlaws that, other than like setting up the dynamic between him and Jalen, that you have to be like, oh, like, you have to do this, this, and this. You can do anything here. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see him kind of spread his wings. So I'm excited by it. I also think it's got a very cool cover. And oftentimes when I see a cool cover, I'm really hoping for the best for that story as well. But we shall see. Oh man, what are our last two? Our last two are
Reign of the Empire
yeah,
and Eyes Like
yeah,
Stars.
yeah. Reign of the Empire, Edge of the Abyss, right? Is that what it's called? Edge of Abyss? Yeah.
Yep.
That one I am excited for, but I'm a little tempered because I was kind of hoping for something a little bit more cleanly in the middle. This is getting a little bit more closer to like right at the start of the Andor time period. And that's where a little bit my worries are, because I would have liked to see the transition of Saw Gerrera a little bit more. I would have liked to see what Mon Mothma did, what Bail Organa did a little bit more closely over those years. Because we know Bail kind of starts a little bit more actively before anybody else, and he stays on Coruscant for a lot of it, but he's still jumping around and doing cool things. But that being said, we also see Saw Gerrera so much more heavily in visual media, like Jedi Fallen Order and everything. So very big character that I want to see these stories be told for. But this one is also by Rebecca Roanhorse, right? This one, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, I haven't read Resistance Reborn. I'm not really sure about that, but I know it doesn't have like the most positive standing on, because of how like ineffective it really was as a lead into episode 9. So I'm moving away from Alexander Freed to her. I'm just like, are we going to see a dip in quality? Is it going to be totally written in a different style? Are they going to be trying to imitate Freed's style? There's a lot more questions for it versus what, like I said, with Mike Chen, with Red Moon, he can do anything he wants. This one, it's like now you have to like be a little bit more careful about the placement of everything. You have to be careful about Rogue One and or a little bit more of those heavier, more adult themed stories that now you have to almost link in with a lot more cleanly. And frankly, I just really loved the parts about the CIS and all the fallout of that too in Mask of Fear. I wish we could have spent a little bit more time in that transition. There's always like this thing about, this dark ages for the Jedi, that this period between episode 3 and episode 4, the dark times. We have a lot at the very beginning of it. We have a lot at the very ending, but we don't always get that middle ground explored as much as I would like. I think this was a place that they could have done a more traditional trilogy of like beginning, middle, and end. And now it kind of feels like there's a beginning, and then we're doing like the beginning and end of like a third act, which I think can still work. I'm a little bit more cautious about it, despite being such a big fan of Mask of Fear. And then finally, the final one, Eyes Like Stars. I'm excited for it. It's obviously it's not really targeted to me, obviously, but I did enjoy the Romance of Lost Stars. I just reread Temptation of the Force just to amplify my feelings around Trials of the Jedi, and it definitely sat a little bit better, even if there are a lot of stops and starts in that story. But I thought that romance was done very thoughtfully in that one. But Lost Stars was able to do a story that could be pretty detailed, but still have like a nice little overview of everything that's happening in the original trilogy, leading directly into Battle Jakku. So I like that. As long as this book is written more like a Lost Stars and a step above Temptation of the Force, I'll be excited. The fact that it's set during the sequel, right before the sequel era, that's also really cool for me to see. Very happy about that stuff. But I mean, I don't know exactly what the tone is gonna be like. I haven't been on that side of book talk and people who, like, read ACOTAR and stuff, if it's gonna be like a PG-13 version of that done here in Star Wars, if this is gonna be a book that gets sequels out of it, or if it's just gonna be a bunch of individual, like, paperback books that you find in your local drug mart or something like that back in the day. Like, I'm not really sure what they're especially going for. I'm just excited that this is not gonna be an end-all be-all genre. This is gonna be an initiative that you can jump into a bunch of other things, like you said, horror and all that. But we don't know much about it. We don't know much about it, and as long as they avoid doing something as graphic and just taking away from the story as Battle Scars, I will definitely check it out because it's not that Battle Scars was a good tie-in. It wasn't to Jedi Fallen Order Survivor, but it's the fact that like we didn't really get to respect a lot of the time spent with those characters in Fallen Order, and it's only the very ending of the book that I really enjoyed, and Fifth Brother was kind of thrown in there, and it was just this original character that has no for all intents and purposes, it's completely ignored in Marin's characterization in Survivor. So this not having any of those boundaries, but being able to follow more of the Lost Stars template of jumping between something pretty cool, but also dealing with the romance, I think this could be pretty successful. But still, my number 4 on the list for me.
We have some comments about the books. First off, we had a super chat from Will of the Force. Thank you so much, Will. Appreciate you supporting the channel. Says the new Visions manga looks sick. May the Force be with you, lads. Thank you so much. Yeah, that does look really cool, and we're gonna get the comics right after this before we wrap up the stream. And Will also said, "Can't wait for Legacy of the Jedi." Or excuse me, Legacy. Need more Jedi Master Leia. And that's the only reason I'm really excited for this book because I don't think that book is going to have much to offer the larger sequel conversation, which is what I'm looking for with the sequel stories. Like I'm really looking for something that's going to improve them overall. And I don't know if Legacy is going to offer much there, but I think for a character who's so absent in Rise of Skywalker like Leia, that's where it can really hit a home run. So even though the Ray stuff I'm sure will be the focus, even though Ray as a character needs a lot of stuff in on the written page, I am far more interested in the Jedi Master Leia stuff. So I'm with you there, Will, and thank you again for the super chat.
Yeah, I think that cover for that Visions manga looks very cool. I just don't really know anything about it yet, right? And I'm hoping it kind of plays a little bit more like Path of the Lightsaber. We haven't covered that on our channel, but I got a chance to read it, and I really enjoyed that. I'm really eager for Volume 2. So I'm curious, like, if this is gonna be like completely original or it's gonna be tied off slash spun off of some other short that we've seen from Visions. I'm not quite sure about the details there, but I know that the overall reception to Ronin as a novel spun off of the duel was not super high. So this being more kind of sticking to that manga to anime pipeline and back and forth that's a little bit more consistent. Hopefully that results in like a really fun Vision spin-off that feels like, oh, this is just the paperback version of something we would have seen as a short. And I hope that it's pretty cool and we get to see some really dynamic art out of it.
Yeah, and everybody else seems fairly interested in the rest of the stories. Dale Skywalker says they could probably get away with more in the YA genre, assumedly talking about the A Court of Roses and Thorns, Thorns and Roses, whatever it is, style that they're going for. And yeah, I'm sure they will because it will be a little less read, and it's going to YA has basically morphed into this like overly sexualized fantasy genre. Like the fans of people who were fans of YA grew up, and now they're fans of this. And they're written and published in that same looking format. So it's to a lot of people YA, but it's really subject matter wise not YA. Um, so we'll see how far Star Wars is willing to go in that regard. Before we move on to comics, which will be the last thing in the stream tonight, I wanted to mention that Essential Legends collection is coming back next year. We've taken a little bit of a break from Essential Legends. We did get a wave in November, but we're not getting a wave next year until August 11th is when our next wave of Essential Legends is coming out. It will be 2 books, Cloak of Deception and Labyrinth of Evil, both James Luceno works. Labyrinth of Evil is the first book in the Dark Lord trilogy, and with these reprints, they've basically gone backwards. We got Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader and Essential Legends in February last year, and then we just got our 20th anniversary re-release of Revenge of the Sith, the illustrated edition, or what is it called? The deluxe edition is what they're calling it. And then now we're getting Labyrinth of Evil next year in August. So that will be something exciting. And then Cloak of Deception, which I think is one of James Luceno's most underrated books and one of the more underrated political books in Star Wars. That is also coming out same day. And for those of you who are interested in the unabridged audiobooks, both of those will be getting unabridged audiobooks. Whereas this latest wave in November, none of the books got unabridged. I believe Razor's Edge and Honor Among Thieves already had them, but Choices of One was the other book in this latest wave, and it did not get an unabridged audiobook, which was kind of shocking and I think really dumb that we should be getting it. And it's the only Timothy Zahn book, I believe, that doesn't have an unabridged audiobook. So it kind of makes no sense. We shall see. Hopefully they do it in the future. But I wanted to mention that before we get to comics and then wrap up our stream tonight. But let us know what you guys think of the books coming out next year and what you think of the comics. And we will try to get to a couple more questions here, but probably going to have to round out after these comics discussions. All right. So next year, we are continuing with multiple different series in 2025, or excuse me, 2026 in Star Wars comics. We're continuing with multiple different series. Star Wars will be continuing the main line that started this year. As of now, we only know a few issues that have been announced, but it's a monthly series, so that will be continuing. Legacy of Vader will be continuing into 2026. We are getting Hyperspace Stories, Tides of Terror continuing. The final issue of Han Solo Hunt for the Falcon is coming out in January as well. We are also getting Hyperspace Stories, The Bad Batch Rogue Agents continuing into next year. Our Jar Jar Binks one shot coming out in February next year. We are getting the new series Shadow of Maul beginning March 4th in 2026. The High Republic Adventures is returning with Pathfinders #1 on March 11th. Hyperspace Stories continuing with Grievous, the next graphic novel from Hyperspace Stories. And that is, as of now, all we know about the early year in Star Wars comics. I'm sure we'll get plenty of other announcements. Always hard to preview comics because a lot of the times the reveals are month by month or a couple months ahead. So there's not too much to deep dive in on the comics side. But when it comes to collected editions, we know there are plenty of things coming out next year. We do have the omnibus coming out next year of Hidden Empire, one of the most unnecessary omnibus they've ever made, but one they are going to use to try to assumedly capitalize on what has been positive sales for Crimson Reign and War of the Bounty Hunters. Excuse me, War of the Bounty Hunters. That one I know sold really well. I'm not sure how Crimson Reign did. The Hidden Empire will be coming out in February. Then in March 17th, we are getting the Empire Omnibus Volume 4, which I believe will wrap up all of the stuff in that era. So that'll be exciting to finish that out. We are getting the hardcover Tales from the Nightlands, which is coming out from Dark Horse. This is continuing with the Kevin Scott kind of Tales of horror vibe series. Then we're getting the final omnibus for Marvel's High Republic, this Phase 3 Trials of the Jedi omnibus. That's pretty exciting to have all that rounded out as well. That is coming out April 21st. Legacy is finally getting an omnibus. It's getting its first Marvel hardcover omnibus May 19th. That will be released. Then we are getting the third volume of The New Republic June 16th. The newspaper strips are also finally getting an omnibus that's been collected in Epic Collections before. And IDW did these really cool, nice newspaper styled, long ways, horizontal hardcovers a few years ago, but most of those are all out of print. I believe all of them are out of print now. I have one of them, and it's a great collection. It's one of the best ways to read old newspaper strips. So I don't know how the omnibus will do it. It probably won't be presented quite as nicely, but at least we'll have all the stories there. And then that is everything from the omnibus side. Manga is actually having a pretty big year for Star Wars. A decently sized year, I guess you could say. Mandalorian is getting its third and fourth volumes of its manga next year. And then, as Will mentioned earlier, we are getting that original manga, Visions Tsukumo, next year on July 14th. That looks really, really awesome. We're also getting a bunch of different trade paperbacks, a lot of series getting released, mini series getting a full trade paperback, and continuing adventures throughout paperbacks. I won't run them all down because every single thing they print as a single issue will get a paperback, but it is a decently sized year in the world of Star Wars. A lot of cool things coming out from the comics. I'm very interested to see what new things come because Star Wars only has a couple main lines and the rest are all mini series. So we constantly are getting new announcements for mini series from Star Wars. I'm very excited for the Shadow of Maul one. I think that'll be a great tie-in. Maul always works great in comics, so that'll be really cool. Very interested to see what Jar Jar one shot will be. It should be fun, but not expecting too much from it. And then in the world of manga, I'm excited for Sukumo, even though it will be a Visions story and not, something fully in the canon. I think it looks pretty awesome. I'm very excited to see what that is. And then on the omnibus side, very happy Legacy is finally getting an omnibus. Those epics have been out of print for years. And it's one of the better Star Wars comics ever. And then after that, hopefully we can finally get an omnibus for the Clone Wars stories from Republic because those ones deserve an omnibus. And I'm just shocked they haven't capitalized on the Clone Wars name. But yep, that's what it looks like so far in 2026 comics.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot, but also not a lot of main lines going on. It does seem like, especially with how Marvel is even approaching their characters, it seems like these 25 issue runs are seemingly in the past, which is a shame because you can't really tell the best story in 5 issues unless it's like very small supporting characters and all that. Like you said, I'm excited for Shadow of Maul because it's gonna be connected to the show. It's gonna be some like fun stuff leading into a movie or TV show, but it's not gonna be something that I'm gonna be like, oh, like this is gonna be so important for Maul's story. Like I know the expectations there. Jar Jar one too. It'll be fun seeing Kelvin Beck and Jar Jar interact and have some writing be done by Ahmed Best, right? Like that's the actor himself behind both and all that. So that stuff will be fun to see. I'm curious about Tsukumo. I mean, we don't really know anything other than that cover. It was just called the Star Wars Visions manga, official manga. We didn't know anything till I think New York Comic Con this year. So very curious where that leads to. But yeah, I mean, we also just don't know a lot about the books and comics in general. It seems like even if it's not going to be a busy year, even if it's like a bit of a down year after High Republics ended, after a lot of main lines have ended, I just don't see it as like this is the end all be all. I wouldn't be surprised if we get another mainline announced next year. Maybe we take a break from the Star Wars mainline because that was only what like 10 issues. But I just don't see how they don't continue Legacy of Vader and reboot it with a different name to have more Kylo content with how well it's been received. Path of the Lightsaber Volume 1 came out in November and telling me that we don't have a Volume 2 on the calendar for 2026. That to me is shocking. It doesn't really follow any of the standard manga timelines. I'm assuming we at least get a Volume 2, if not a Volume 2 and 3 next year. But we'll see how that plays out. And that's something I definitely want to see more of. But yeah, no, I'm hoping we get to see more interesting things. Maybe they have a Mandalorian and Grogu comic of some sorts, kind of flesh out stuff, be a transition piece between season 3 and the start of the movie or some adventures set around that. Who knows? There's a lot that's going on there in the comic world, but it really does feel like it's more of a year for collectors of the omnibuses and a lot of the Legends material more than anything new.
Yeah, that seems to be the main thing they've announced so far. I'm with you that there's no way we don't hear more about comics soon. There's no way they're just gonna, let an entire kind of a subsection of Marvel just fizzle out with, random one shots and miniseries throughout the rest of the year. I'm sure we'll get the announcement of extended ongoings or new ongoings in the future here, but it is right now very blank in terms of the scheduling right now around comics. But as an omnibus collector, I'm very excited about Legacy. I just think that's a huge win for us as omnibus collectors. And just as people who want this stuff reprinted, because Legacy has been so hard to find, it's so expensive in paperback that if you have the omnibus version, it does make it affordable and also readable for people who want to get physical comics. Here is to hoping that Clone Wars is next. But I think that's going to wrap up our stream tonight, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this special ultra packed episode 2026 preview. Hopefully, you're all enjoying the content from 2025. We really appreciate all of your support as we hit 40K subs this year. Thank you so much for supporting the channel throughout the last 12 months. And we really look forward to continuing the Star Wars journey into 2026 as we have kind of laid out here. And hopefully we get some awesome releases in all four of the topics we talked about tonight. We didn't even get the chance to get to video games, which we can cover maybe next week, because we do have 2 Star Wars video games coming out next year as well. So pretty packed year for Star Wars. Excited for a lot of the stuff coming. Can't wait to hear what your guys' thoughts are on everything. So thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe for more content just like this. If you're new, make sure you join us every Tuesday where we talk about Star Wars and take your guys' questions. Next week, we'll be back pretty much to the full Q&A format. So bring your guys' questions about anything you'd like next week. Stay tuned for more content throughout the week. Videos, shorts, polls twice a day, every day. Make sure you're voting in those as well. Thanks so much for watching the stream tonight, everybody. And we will see you all next week.